Welcome, seeker of the unknown. Tonight, you'll drift into darkness not with lullabies, but with tales so unsettling they'll linger behind your closed eyelids. Each of these 35 true cult stories hides a secret edge, one that will whisper in your mind long after the screen goes dark. From the hidden jungles of South America to secluded compounds in rural America, you'll meet charismatic leaders who wielded unthinkable power over desperate followers. You'll witness mass suicides, mind-bending rituals, and survivors who still tremble at the memory of what they endured. Stay with me until the very end, because the final story isn't just chilling, it's a warning. By the time you hear it, you'll understand why curiosity can be more dangerous than fear itself. Jonestown Massacre, People's Temple. Ready to uncover how devotion can become your worst enemy? By the time you hear this story, you'll know why thirst for paradise can turn into a desert of despair. Next, we'll meet the man whose honeyed words built a kingdom of fear. Jim Jones began in Indiana, preaching brotherhood with a smile so warm it felt like sunshine on your skin. He spoke of equality and community, and people flocked to his velvet sermons, their eyes glinting with hope. But behind closed doors, his laughter carried an edge, like steel hidden beneath silk. In just a few years, that edge would cut deeper than anyone could imagine. Stay tuned to learn how a simple church became a gilded cage. By 1974, Jones moved his flock to the sweltering jungles of Guyana, promising a new Eden beside a lazy river. Imagine waking to birdsong draped in thick, fragrant air, and feeling a chill in your spine at sunrise. The settlement was christened Jonestown, but the name belied the tension simmering beneath lush leaves. Crops wilted, rations dwindled, and the gentle hum of community meetings masked a growing unease. You won't believe how whispers turned into orders in the blink of an eye. Life in Jonestown felt like a dream painted in pastel hues. Colorful houses, children playing in red mud, and Jones himself patrolling the lanes. But those same lanes echoed with the tread of armed guards. Every evening, members stood in tight rows for white night drills, preparing for an enemy that only Jones described. Imagine your heartbeat matching the steady drum of feet on dirt. What began as a precaution soon slipped into compulsion, and fear soaked every breath. Up next, the moment a single voice dared to break the silence. That voice belonged to Christine Miller, a woman who questioned the plan to poison outsiders rather than surrender Jonestown. In a dimly lit pavilion, her words rippled through the air like stone tossed into a still pond. She reminded everyone of their faith and humanity, but Jones waved her down with icy disdain. The hushed gasps of the crowd spoke volumes, unspoken dread pooling like water at their feet. Christine's courage was a spark, but sparks can be snuffed out in an instant. Keep listening to see how that spark was stamped out forever. On November 18, 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan arrived alongside journalists and defectors under the thick canopy. The air tasted of damp earth and anticipation. A handful of brave souls slipped through checkpoint eyes, clutching suitcases and whispered goodbyes. For a fleeting moment, hope teased the horizon, perhaps release from Jones's grip. But as they reached the airstrip, a sudden crack rang out. A hail of bullets shattered the stillness, and terror bloomed in hearts like black flowers. You'll learn next how horror spilled from sky to ground. Amid the chaos, Jones instructed his followers to drink Flavor Aid laced with cyanide, calling it an act of revolutionary suicide. Picture hundreds of trembling hands lifting cups to parched lips, the sweet powder dissolving into ash. Parents pressed children tight, murmuring lullabies as life slipped away. Some shots rang out from inside the pavilion, mercy for those who hesitated. The air turned sticky with heat and sorrow, as if the jungle itself mourned. Stay with me to feel the final, haunting notes of this requiem. When silence fell, over 900 people lay still under the green canopy, men, women, and children sharing one last dread-soaked breath. A distant humming insect orchestra continued without pause, unconcerned by the tragedy below. Only a handful of survivors escaped, stumbling through mud and confusion toward the world they had abandoned. Their eyes carried a new weight, one no sunlight could lift. Up next, we'll discover how those haunted souls rebuilt their lives from the ashes of Jonestown. In the weeks that followed, investigators picked through the ruins, Empty cups, stained floors, and charred scriptures. The world watched in stunned horror. How could a promise of paradise become a tomb? Families pieced together photos of smiling faces now forever frozen. It was a warning, whispered on every wind. Blind obedience can lead you into the jaws of your own undoing. But there's one more secret lurking in these shadows. One that still sends shivers down the spine of anyone who hears it. Stay with me, because the Jonestown legacy isn't just a chapter in history. It's a mirror held up to our own need for comfort, belonging, and unwavering certainty. And if you think you know the answer, you haven't heard the half of it yet. Heaven's Gate mass suicide. Ready to peel back the veil on a story so chilling it still echoes today, and learn the hidden lesson it holds about why we seek to belong. Imagine a large, sunlit house in a quiet San Diego suburb, the gentle whisper of ocean air drifting through open windows. Inside, the scent of shampoo mingled with faint traces of antiseptic. On March 26, 1997, deputies found 39 bodies arranged like a somber ceremony, each one dressed in matching dark clothes and white Nike shoes. But this hush was only the end of a longer journey, and you're about to discover how it began. In the early 1970s, a middle-aged music teacher named Marshall Applewhite felt a hollow ache after a sudden job loss. Across town, a nurse named Bonnie Nettles was chasing loose threads of faith in tarot cards and whispered seances. They met in a hospital hallway perfumed with rubbing alcohol and conversation, two souls drawn together by shared dreams of other worlds. What they built from that chance encounter would grow into something neither could quite explain, and the classroom they formed next would change everything. By 1975, Applewhite and Nettles had gathered a small circle they called the class. Their meeting room smelled of fresh coffee and quiet excitement, the steady hum of a slide projector punctuating stories of cosmic prophets. They spoke of leaving Earth behind, of shedding the limits of flesh to board a spaceship waiting in the stars. Friends and family vanished as members sold homes and cars, stepping into a routine of plain meals and strict schedules. But what really held them fast was the promise of the next level, and soon, the sky would issue its call. When the comet Hale-Bopp blazed across the night sky in early 1997, it ignited hope like a flare in the darkness. Cool spring nights carried a crisp breeze that whipped around telescopes trained on its bright tail, and the class saw more than streaking ice and dust. They read a hidden message. Behind the shimmering halo, a spacecraft hovered, ready to carry them home. Every heart beat faster at that sight. Every breath felt charged with possibility. And as they plotted their final move, they believed the universe was preparing to open its gates. On the night they chose, the house filled with soft rustles of plastic and the sweet tang of apple sauce laced with phenobarbital. A pale hush settled over 39 believers as each placed a plastic bag over their head and slipped into unconsciousness. Purple sheets were draped over motionless forms, and flickering candles cast gentle shadows on the walls. In that silence, it felt less like an ending and more like a passage, until dawn broke and the world realized what had happened. But the true shock waited just beyond those doors. News crews swarmed the scene, cameras flashing like curious fireflies against the white walls. Reporters spoke in hushed tones about cults and brainwashing, but the people inside had seen themselves as pioneers, not victims. The image of identical bodies under purple cloth struck a chord of sorrow and fascination around the globe. Yet the greatest questions hovered above those headlines. Why would anyone give up all they knew for a promise written in the stars? In the days that followed, friends of the departed remembered laughter in shared meals, the glow of storytelling around campfires, and the comfort of belonging to something larger than themselves. Others recoiled at the loss, wondering how devotion could become so absolute. Through it all, one lesson stood clear. The crave for meaning and family can sometimes lead us farther than we ever planned. And it's that same longing that connects us all, even now. So what does Heaven's Gate teach us about the paths we follow? It warns that the brightest hopes can blind us to the ground beneath our feet. It shows that any promise of escape, no matter how beautiful, demands a second look. Our minds hunger for belonging, and if we're not careful, we may trade our freedom for a story that isn't ours to live. Yet in understanding their journey, We learn to chart our own with open eyes. Next time you gaze up at a comet or feel the pull of a big idea, remember their choice and ask yourself which horizon you really want to cross. Tate, LaBianca murders, the Manson family. Ready to uncover how a circle of lost souls fell under one man's spell and learn the chilling truth that still warns us today? Picture a sweltering Los Angeles night in early August 1969, the heat pressing against your skin like a heavy blanket. You'd feel the asphalt under your bare feet warming with every heartbeat, and you'd sense that something was off in the stillness. On August 9th and 10th, a handful of young followers of Charles Manson slipped through quiet neighborhoods and left behind scenes so brutal that they cracked the city's sense of safety forever. By the end, you'll see why this story isn't just history. It's a lesson about the power of belonging. Charles Manson arrived in Los Angeles in 1967, trailing a scent of patchouli and promises of love. He spun tales under makeshift tents, his voice soft but insistent, drawing in runaways and dreamers who craved purpose. In candlelit gatherings, he whispered that the world was on the brink of collapse, and only his family would be spared. As you breathe in the hint of incense still hanging in those old ranch halls, know that their chain of trust snapped into place that night, and no one saw it coming. On the cool, starlit evening of August 8th, for members, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian pulled up to 10050 Cielo Drive. The scent of jasmine drifted from a nearby garden, masking the dread beneath. Inside, Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, laughed with friends under soft lamps. They heard nothing until footsteps crept up the stairs, and then a knife flashed. But inside that house, something snapped. By dawn, for bodies lay in a crimson halo, and a frightened young man named Stephen Parent lay dead in the driveway. The front door bore a single word, scrawled in living blood: pig. Reporters would later call it soulless, but the people inside believed they were writing a message to a world they thought had already betrayed them. That night changed everything, but it was only the beginning. The very next evening, Manson joined Watson, Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and others at 3301 Waverly Drive. Imagine stepping into a living room where fresh coffee still steamed and morning light filtered through dust motes. Leno and Rosemary LaBianca sat bound to chairs, confusion in their eyes as the killers whispered false promises of a robbery. Then came the bayonet and the carving fork, and words like war and helter-skelter drip written in blood across every surface. The dawn the next day held a secret no one expected. Within weeks, detectives pored over tire tracks in dry backyard soil and traced blood-soaked footprints back to Spahn Ranch. News vans gathered at dusty gates where once beaming followers had mingled with Hollywood's elite. In courtrooms made for echoes, the gentle clink of guard keys and the hush of shifting bodies framed scenes of shock. When Manson grinned at cameras and spoke of helter-skelter, many gasped at the calm behind his eyes. But the real storm was still on the horizon. At their 1970 trial, 9 members faced first-degree murder charges. Witnesses described nights of LSD trips, bizarre dances under the moon, and a leader who claimed to be both Messiah and devil. As the jury listened, you could almost taste the dust in the silent courtroom and feel the tension coil in the air. When verdicts came, death sentences echoed through the hall, but California soon struck down capital punishment, sparing them. And the echoes of those words still haunt us. So what does this dark chapter teach us? It warns that the promise of a caring circle can hide the sharpest blade. It shows how longing for meaning and acceptance can blind us to warning signs. The urge to belong is as natural as breathing, but when trust becomes obedience, freedom dies. Next time you hear the quiet call of a new family under perfect skies, remember this story and ask yourself, is it a refuge or is it the edge of a knife? Waco Siege, Branch Davidians. Ever wondered how a routine weapons raid turned into a 51-day standoff that still echoes today? Stay with me, and you'll discover how faith, fear, and raw power collided, and what it teaches us about holding on to truth. Picture the Mount Carmel Center at first light, soft gold rays slipping through tall pines, the air cool against your skin, and the faint scent of leather on worn boots. Inside those weathered wooden buildings lived a small band of believers led by David Koresh. He spoke in low tones about secrets hidden in ancient texts, drawing in followers who hung on every word. They slept on simple cots, shared daily bread, and believed they were preparing for a moment when the world would tip into chaos and only they would survive. But none of them dreamed that the world would come knocking at their door. Then came February 28, 1993. Imagine watching TV news in a cramped living room, the screen flickering with urgent headlines about an incoming ATF raid. Trucks with loud engines rolled up under a pale winter sun, their tires crunching on gravel roads. Hushed voices barked orders through megaphones, and the smell of gun oil hung heavy in the air. At 9:45 a.m., a firefight erupted, first a pop, then a hail of bullets slicing through the quiet morning. Deputy Dawson's felt the sting of shrapnel, while inside the compound, children pressed faces against dusty windows in panic. Within minutes, 4 agents lay wounded and 6 members of the Branch Davidians were dead. And with that echo of gunfire, a siege began that no one saw coming. Over the next days, FBI negotiators arrived in sleek cars, their shoes clicking on wooden floors as they stepped into makeshift conference rooms. Through phones wired with listening devices, Koresh delivered sermons filled with hopeful verses and dire warnings. Outside, endless caravans of RVs and news vans lined the dusty lanes, their engines humming like restless insects. At night, officers blasted rock music and bursts of static through loudspeakers, hoping to rattle sleeping minds. Yet in the hush before dawn, the survivors inside set out cartons of milk, each marked with tiny microphones. Negotiators coaxed 20-odd children into the arms of waiting workers, the kids blinking against the thin spring sunlight as they stepped onto safe ground. Still, about 100 adults remained behind those tall fences. The longer they waited, the higher the tension climbed. Spring days rolled into April, and the compound settled into a strange rhythm. Early mornings were soft with birdsong, midday heat rippled like a mirage on rundown roofs, and evenings held a tense calm as the sun dipped below distant hills. Koresh claimed that final prophecies were falling into place, and that only he could unlock the world's fate. Inside barns full of hay, secret meetings hummed with anticipation. Outside, tactical teams drilled at dawn, their footsteps barely making a sound on packed earth. Federal leaders debated whether to storm the place or keep talking. Every plan they drew up felt like watching sand slip through fingers. And even as commanders measured the strength of concrete walls, something deeper was at stake. At 6 a.m. on April 19th, the silence cracked. Armored vehicles rolled forward, their metal sides gleaming beneath a pale sky. From turret ports, hoses pumped in tear gas that smelled of burning rubber and dread. Inside, men and women gasped as acrid fog spread through hallways, clinging to throats and eyes. Then, in 3 separate spots, flames ignited, first a thin wisp at a barn door, then sudden tongues of fire in a living room, and finally a burst atop a pile of stacked wood. Smoke curled into the clouds, carrying the smell of charred pine. Shouts and gunfire rang out, but in minutes, the entire compound was engulfed. Firefighters stood back, hoses idle, as the buildings collapsed into glowing ruins. By day's end, 76 people lay dead in the ashes. In the stunned aftermath, the air still tasted of smoke and sorrow. Neighbors walked past empty concrete pads and blackened beams, their footsteps echoing in a silence heavier than any music. Families sifted through memories, laughter around a table, the hush of prayer before sleep, the warmth of shared belief. Some blamed the government for pushing too hard, others blamed Koresh for leading hearts astray. Journalists replayed every word of those final calls. But beneath the headlines lies a lesson that goes beyond headlines. When faith becomes fortress and power feels absolute, the line between safety and catastrophe can vanish in a single moment. So next time you watch a conflict unfold on your screen, remember Waco. Remember how easy it is for trust to fracture and for good intentions to become a spark in dry grass. Ask yourself where you draw your own lines, and which truths you'll hold on to when the world turns its eyes your way. NXIVM branding scandal. Ever wondered how a self-help program turned women into secret slaves? And walk away knowing the red flags to spot before you sign up anywhere? By the end of this video, You'll see exactly how a promise of empowerment became a trap, and how you can guard your own heart next time someone offers you the world. Picture yourself in a bright ballroom, sunlight pouring through high windows, and the scent of fresh coffee swirling in the air. Women sat in neat rows, notebooks open and pens poised, as the instructor urged them to drop old fears and step into greatness. It felt like a pep talk at first: warm smiles, laughter, lights glinting off the polished hardwood floor. That's how NXIVM drew them in, with the promise of belonging and the thrill of becoming unstoppable. But behind those cheers, a darker beat was humming. Stick around to learn how that beat turned into a warning bell. Step into a silent basement lit by a single, flickering candle. The air smelled faintly of leather and sweat. One by one, women knelt on a cold tile floor, heads lowered, voices trembling. In the center, a steel branding iron glowed red with heat. They were told it was a symbol of commitment, but each touch burned more than skin. When the iron pressed down, it left Ranieri's initials forever marked on tender flesh. Some closed their eyes and whispered prayers. Others bit their lips and shook. In that moment, the pain was both scar and secret, and that secret would drive them deeper into a hidden world they never imagined. Behind closed doors and locked laptop screens, the true power play began. Soft click of mouse buttons, quiet whir of hard drives. Members recorded video confessions, dark thoughts, past mistakes, private fears, and handed those files over to the group's leaders. Those files became invisible chains. One slip up in behavior, one sign of doubt, and the tapes or photos could be released. Suddenly, empowerment felt like leverage. Your own story could be used against you. That's how trust turned into control, and why even the bravest women found themselves trapped in silence. Meet Sarah Edmondson sitting in a cozy living room with the late afternoon sun warming her shoulders. She joined hoping for growth, found friendship and purpose, and ended up branded and belittled. One evening, she looked at her own reflection, traced the scar with shaking fingers, and realized the cost was far too high. In a voice quivering with both fear and relief, she decided to go public, risking her career, her privacy, everything. When her words hit the headlines, the cracks in NXIVM's facade sprang open. But Sarah's courage was only the first push. Keep watching to see how ripples from her decision spread farther than she ever guessed. Now imagine a courtroom, the hush broken by the soft tap of a gavel. Wooden panels shone under bright lights. Family members sat stiff in chairs, eyes fixed on the front row where Allison Mack, once a smiling star of Smallville, trembled as she admitted her part in the scheme. Her voice cracked when she spoke of recruiting friends into the secret circle, of handing over nude photos, of watching dreamers crumble under the weight of their own shame. Reporters scrawled on notepads, cameras clicked, and the public gasped at every new detail. When the judge handed down sentences, the sound of those words echoed the pain of every woman who had ever doubted herself. As the dust settled on NXIVM's ruins, families picked up the pieces. Some women faced years of therapy to rebuild trust in their own hearts. Others changed careers, moved towns, reinvented themselves one cautious step at a time. Every survivor carried a lesson. The hunger for meaning and friendship can blind us to warning signs, and absolute promises usually come at a hidden cost. If something feels too perfect, too all in, pause and breathe. Ask questions. Listen to that little whisper of doubt, and treat it as your strongest guard. So next time you're offered a life-changing system, take a moment to feel the air around you. Notice the color of the walls, the tone of the speaker's voice, the way they ask you to hand over your secrets. When you feel that gentle tug at your soul, a pull toward instant trust, remember the story of NXIVM and those painful brands. And ask yourself, what would you never give up for the sake of belonging? Tokyo subway sarin attack, Aum Shinrikyo. Ever wondered how a regular morning commute turned into Japan's darkest hour, and walk away knowing how invisible threats can hide in plain sight? Today, you'll feel the rush of that day, piece together the warning signs, and learn why vigilance still matters. Picture Tokyo's underground at 7 a.m. on March 20th, 1995. The corridors hummed with footsteps and soft murmur of conversations. Steam spiraled up from coffee cups and station kiosks, and the distant click of train wheels grew louder by the second. For thousands, It was just another trip to work. But beneath the flip of turnstiles, something deadly waited to slip free, and it sparks the first memory you need to hold on to. Back in the mid-80s, a quiet man named Shoko Asahara taught yoga in a dimly lit room scented with incense and promise. He spoke of hidden truths and a coming apocalypse, drawing in seekers who craved purpose. In that hush, followers leaned forward on thin mats, trusting his gentle tone. He offered belonging and a path to power. But as you'll soon see, any road paved with blind faith can lead far beyond what you bargained for. Deep in a mountaintop compound, glass beakers clinked in a makeshift lab. The air tasted metallic, and fluorescent lights flickered over steel tables. Small rodents scurried in cages, part of experiments creating sarin, a nerve agent so potent it kills with just a few drops. Cult members in crisp lab coats moved like clockwork, hiding their work behind tarps and locked doors. They called it science. You could call it the moment where hope curdled into menace. Now imagine boarding one of 5-pack subway cars just after dawn. You'd press against the door as it slid shut, inhale the faint scent of damp tiles, and settle in for the ride. Under your feet, the train's metal floor thrummed like a heartbeat. In the same car, a figure in sunglasses clutched a newspaper-wrapped package. Nobody thought twice, until a sharpened umbrella tip pierced the paper and a silent cloud of sarin drifted down. Invisible as smoke yet heavy with danger, it began its deadly dance through each car, turning routine into nightmare in an instant. At Tsukiji Station, commuters streaming off the Chiyoda line froze when they saw strangers on the platform gagging and collapsing. A station attendant, feeling duty more than fear, scooped up a leaking package to clear the way. His handkerchief became soaked with poison. He gasped for breath as eyes blurred and limbs trembled. That act of courage would cost him his life, but it also gave medics a clue to track the source. Even in chaos, bravery can shine a guiding light. As police and paramedics rushed in, confusion rippled through Marunouchi and Hibiya lines too. Crowded platforms echoed with screams, the hiss of public address speakers, and the mechanical whir of automated doors. People coughed, vision clouded, voices went silent. Some crawled toward exit ramps. Others lay stunned in puddles of acrid liquid. Emergency crews donned hazmat suits, their boots squelching on slick floors. Every second stretched as they scrambled to treat victims and secure the scene, and every moment counted. Investigators followed tire tracks and traced tiny traces of sarin back to Aoun Shinrikyo's hidden labs in Yamanashi Prefecture. Drone of helicopters overhead blended with the snap of handcuffs. Doors burst open to reveal vats of chemicals and stacks of manuals detailing how to weaponize them. More than 100 members, including Asahara himself, were arrested in swift raids. Yet, even behind bars, the aftermath of that morning continued to coil through Tokyo's veins. In hospitals, survivors lay wrapped in clean white sheets. Nurses gently dabbed watery eyes and pressed breathing masks to pale faces. Some would recover, others carried nerve damage for life. Stories emerged of commuters who lost friends, families torn apart by grief, and children never to see a parent again. Scarred walls and bulletproof glass now line station entrances as a constant reminder. When a world built on routine falters, trust must be rebuilt from the ground up. So what does the Tokyo subway attack teach us? First, that any promise of easy answers, no matter how soothing, deserves a second look. Second, that science without conscience is a doorway to ruin. And third, that in crowds of strangers, courage and compassion can still light the way out of darkness. When you step onto a crowded train next time, pause for a breath. Notice the people around you, the signs you might have missed. Because the real protection comes from staying alert and never underestimating what's hidden in plain sight. Stick around for the next deep dive where we explore how everyday heroes reshaped emergency response around the world and how you can carry that spark into your own life. Mass killings by the Movement for the Restoration of the Ten Commandments, Uganda. Ever wondered how a group claiming to restore holy laws turned into a death trap? And learn the 3 signs of a place you should never hand over your trust? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to protect yourself when someone dangles a promise of heaven on earth. In the late 1980s, Uganda's air was thick with echoes of conflict and the sting of loss. The rule of Idi Amin was still a fresh wound, and the whisper of AIDS carried fear through villages. People clamored for hope, and that's when two strangers met. Credonia Mwerinde, once known for her gentle laugh in a dim bar lit by flickering bulbs, and Joseph Kibwetir, a soft-spoken former schoolteacher with a knack for quoting scripture. Together, they claimed to have visions of the Virgin Mary shimmering in afternoon light, and that first flash of celestial promise set the stage for everything that followed. Picture a red clay courtyard at dawn, the scent of sweat mingling with the fragrance of coffee beans roasting over an open flame. Followers arrived barefoot, carrying sacks of yams and cotton bags filled with old clothes. Inside makeshift huts, Mwerinde would press her palm to a trembling seeker's forehead, whispering that only strict obedience to the Ten Commandments could shield them from a coming apocalypse. When you step into a place where silence becomes holiness, it feels like stepping across a threshold, and you lose track of just how far you've walked into someone else's story. Stay tuned to discover how that story took a deadly turn. As the movement grew, a compound rose on a hillside near Kinungu. Fresh-cut pine framed new dormitories and a chapel painted with bright murals of angels. Every wall bore reminders of sin, carved tablets engraved with the Ten Commandments, each letter sharp as a warning. On Fridays, the air would hush at noon as members knelt on cool clay floors, mouths dry from fasting. They traded prayers instead of words, fearing any slip of the tongue would break the ninth commandment. That hush taught obedience, but it also masked the sound of questions rising in small, worried hearts. December 31st, 1999, arrived under a canopy of stars so clear you could count every pinprick of light. Drum beats echoed from the little chapel as the clock struck midnight, and voices joined in a hymn that swelled like rippling water. Then, as the final echo faded, someone noticed the sun would still rise, and the promise of immediate salvation felt as distant as a fading dream. Rumors swirled like dust kicked up by startled feet. Maybe a new date would come. Maybe they'd need more sacrifice. When a prophecy falls apart, fear gathers like a storm cloud, ready to burst. In our next segment, you'll see how leaders turned that fear into final orders. On the morning of March 17, 2000, a low mist curled around the compound's rooftops, and the air was heavy with the promise of rain. Followers gathered inside the chapel, the smell of polished wood sharp in their nostrils. The doors were locked, and only a single slit of sunlight filtered through a glass window high above. Some members sipped tea laced with bitter powder. Others bowed their heads, bracing for what came next. When the gas took hold, it felt as though the walls themselves were breathing in despair. Yet those who perished believed they were stepping into glory. They only discovered too late they were walking into a trap. After the smoke cleared, villagers found charred beams and burned-out benches, the earth around them spongy with ashes. But the true horror lay beyond. Over 400 bodies buried in shallow pits, heads turned as if sleeping, faces calm in their final rest. Investigators sifted through clay soil with gloved hands, the clink of shovels echoing across the field. They uncovered the remains of children clutching tattered blankets, and elders still clutching rosaries. When hate wears the mask of holiness, it leaves scars deeper than any flame. Coming up, how families pieced together the truth and the questions they still ask today. In the weeks that followed, the world grappled with one haunting question: mass suicide or cold-blooded murder. Survivors spoke of leaders who twisted scripture into chains, promising escape only at the price of total surrender. Families sifted through memories of laughter around evening fires, the snap of banana leaves in the wind, the warmth of shared meals. In those stories, they found the clues they should have seen: the silence that felt too heavy, the rules that grew too strict, the love that demanded everything. Now you have them too. So what can you take from this tragedy? First, any group that asks you to drop your questions is hiding its weakest point. Second, if obedience becomes more important than honesty, it's time to step back. And third, when promises of perfection feel too bright to question, remember the sun can dazzle as it sets. Keep these signs close, and you'll spot the red flags long before they become warning sirens. Stick around for our next deep dive into how everyday communities stay safe and the simple questions you can ask before you ever step across someone else's threshold of hope. Order of the Solar Temple Suicides. If you want to uncover the hidden truths of blind faith and find the lessons to protect your own heart, stick with me as we dive into the chilling story of the Order of the Solar Temple Suicides. Imagine a warm summer evening in Geneva, 1984, the gentle hum of conversation floating off cobblestone streets. Inside a modest hall, Luc Juret, wearing a dark cloak that brushed the floor, whispered of ancient knights reborn and silent journeys through the cosmos. Joseph de Mambro stood by his side, silver hair glinting under oil lamps, promising that the Earth's end was near and that only their order would reach a new paradise. A few dozen people leaned forward, drawn by the lure of secrets. They felt a strange pulse in the room, a soft invitation they could not ignore. Right then, a seed was planted. Within months, lodges spread from Switzerland to France and Canada, each decorated with candles and aromatic herbs that warmed the air. In one lodge, a banker traced star maps on parchment, his fingers stained with ink, while a schoolteacher closed her eyes at a circle of incense, seeing light dance on the walls. Members shared wine on star-shaped tables, laughing as they spoke of distant worlds. They believed that by blending Templar ritual with modern healing, they could transcend Earth's final days. But behind the laughter, whispers of doubt drifted through empty hallways, and a question began to haunt them. At what cost would they buy the promise of the stars? Late in 1994, frost kissed the fields of Cherry, Switzerland. One crisp October dawn, villagers spotted a thin column of smoke rising from a remote farm. Inside, rescuers discovered an underground chapel ringed with mirrors reflecting a single flame. There lay 53 bodies arranged in a perfect star pattern, each robe untouched by wind, each face frozen in a last expression of peace or horror. On a small altar, a crimson rose sat beside a glass of drained champagne. Among the hush of broken wood and scorched stone, authorities found traces of drugs and silenced gunshots. It was a scene that balanced between ritual and massacre. And this was only the curtain rising on the tragedy to come. Just weeks later in Morin Heights, Canada, the scent of pine wood was heavy in the air as police broke into a quiet home. There lay a young couple and their infant, cozy blankets undisturbed, but beneath lay a cold truth. Their final act was marked by a note promising eternal transit. Next door, unopened letters spoke of betrayal by those who left the order behind. Neighbors whispered of the family's sudden retreat into mystery. Some said the leaders had tricked them with visions of light. Others blamed deep devotion that became a blindfold. The contrast between the soft morning sun and the chill of that living room offered a glimpse of how hope had curdled into sorrow. In December 1995, the Vercors Mountains in France held their own secret. At night, stars spilled across a sky so clear it looked like polished glass. Yet inside a burned chalet, 16 former members lay still, each body curled as if in meditation. They had been drawn back by old loyalties, despite warnings from friends and family. A telltale recording played on a scorched tape deck, urging them to join the gathering of the faithful. Then, in March 1997, another scene emerged in Quebec. 5 people found in ritual garments, jars of herbal tea, and farewell letters lying beside their beds. Each chapter echoed the first, a refrain of devotion twisted into final silence. The story of these 74 lives ended in ash and unanswered questions. In empty chalets where laughter once rang, wind now stirs papers and dusty robes on floorboards. Families sifted through charred photos, trying to match warm smiles with the hollow gazes left behind. Experts traced how whispers of apocalypse, mixed with late-night meetings and subtle pressure, created a path that few saw until it was too late. In the wake of the tragedy, counselors began visiting small towns, sharing simple ways to spot tiny warning signs, a demand for too much money, a suggestion to cut off friends. Schools taught parents to notice secret codes and glimmers of fear in a child's eyes. Police and social workers filled notebooks with the echoes of those scorched rooms, using them as guides to protect new seekers. This dark tale reshaped how we watch for hidden groups, and how we listen to those who promise salvation. And it taught us, when someone offers escape from a broken world, pause and ask, what are they asking for in return? Now, with the echo of old candles still in our minds, take a breath and remember the power of clear thought. If you ever feel the pull of promises wrapped in shadows, let your heart beat against the quiet. Like those seekers who learned to chart the stars, we can chart our own choices, mapping each step with honest questions instead of blind trust. Notice when someone asks for full loyalty or whispers of apocalyptic secrets. In our next story, we'll show you the exact questions to ask when a voice calls you into the dark and guide you through real examples from modern groups, so you can spot the soft draw of hidden promises before it's too late. Make sure you stick around. You won't want to miss it. Rajneeshi bioterror attack in Oregon. If you want to learn how a peaceful salad bar turned into a weapon and walk away knowing exactly how to spot hidden dangers before they strike, stay with me. Picture a bright August morning in the Dalles, Oregon, 1984, sunlight warming the pavement and the scent of fresh greens drifting from 10 bustling restaurants. Around long tables tucked beneath awnings, folks laughed over crisp lettuce and tangy dressings, unaware that somewhere in the air, a quiet plan was brewing. Ma Anand Sheila, the fiery second-in-command of the Rajneeshi commune, had silently sworn to seize power in Wasco County's election, and she chose kitchen counters as her battlefield. What unfolded would become America's first and largest bioterror attack, and it almost slipped under everyone's radar. Back in 1981, thousands of followers had poured onto the 64,000-acre Big Muddy Ranch, transforming it into Rajneeshpuram, an intentional community of red-robed believers seeking spiritual awakening under Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. In Antelope, Oregon, locals watched these newcomers erect a 4-story airstrip, a fire department, even their own zip code. At morning meditations, chants floated over fields of tilled soil, while in the evenings the scent of incense curled through ramshackle lodges. Yet beneath the communal smiles, friction simmered, especially when the group's share a home scheme to import homeless voters failed. And that's when dark ideas found fertile ground. On a humid afternoon in late August, a woman in plain clothes approached the Taco Time salsa bar, her hands shaking as she unzipped a plastic pouch filled with a murky liquid. She waited for the crowd to thin, then let the salmonella-laden slurry drip into the salsa bowl. In seconds, she moved to Shakey's Pizza, plunging a syringe of bacteria into the blue cheese dressing. Microphones hush-quieted the story for weeks, until locals suddenly began clutching stomachs and bolting for restrooms. What looked like a wave of bad lettuce was actually a calculated strike on democracy itself. Almost overnight, nearly 750 people reported vomiting fits, chills, and crippling stomach pain. Hospitals in the Dalles brimmed with victims, corridors echoing with the hiss of gurney wheels and the strained voices of nurses. The smell of antiseptic clung to every room, while worried families paced waiting areas under buzzing fluorescent lights. 45 patients landed in beds hooked to 4 drips, none deadly, but all shocking. People whispered about tainted food, but who would dream of a cult-engineered epidemic? As the summer haze lingered, the mystery only deepened. Investigators from the Oregon Health Authority arrived, clipboards in hand, asking about hand washing and food prep routines. A mild tremor of relief spread when they blamed sloppy kitchen staff, until the Centers for Disease Control began to suspect something far more sinister. Behind closed doors, officials exchanged furrowed frowns over test tubes and vials. They scoured lab records and retraced abusers' steps, piecing together a puzzle no chef could have framed. And then, a year later, a breakthrough. A matching salmonella strain was found in the commune's own medical laboratory. When FBI agents burst into Rajneeshpuram, the air smelled of dust and rich earth from nearby fields. They uncovered refrigerators stocked with bacterial cultures, journals on germ warfare, and logs detailing every restaurant attack. Ma Anand Sheila fled first, slipping out of the commune in a cloud of controversy. But Diane Ivanonang, known as Ma Anand Puja, remained, her calm facade cracking during questioning as investigators peeled back layers of secrets. In the end, 2 top officials were indicted for attempted murder and conspiracy, serving nearly 30 months behind bars. In the wake of the scandal, the ranch emptied. Fields once tilled by chanting devotees lay fallow, cabins stood silent, and red robes drifted like fallen leaves in the wind. Wasco County rebuilt trust one handshake at a time, teaching restaurant workers strict hygiene rules and urging voters to report anything odd at the ballot box. Nationally, public health agencies crafted new protocols for outbreak investigations, reminders that even the friendliest setting can hide a dangerous edge. But the story doesn't end here. Up next, we'll peel back the layers of how everyday places, from coffee shops to community centers, could be used as secret stages for darker schemes, and reveal the exact questions you should ask when things feel off. Stick around, because your next morning latte might hold more than just caffeine, and knowing the signs could save lives. Yearning for Zion Ranch Raid, FLDS. If you want to uncover how a hidden desert kingdom rattled an entire state and learn the red flags of secret power, stay right here. Picture a dusty Texas highway at dawn in 2003, the sun barely above the horizon as a convoy of trucks rolls onto a 1,700-acre spread. Someone named David Allred smiles, claiming it's just a hunting retreat, while behind him crews unload logs for cabins and steel beams for a massive temple. The wind carries the scent of freshly cut cedar, and ranch hands whistle, unaware that they're building the heart of a secret society. But that quiet morning planted a seed that would soon sprout into a statewide showdown. By mid-2005, the yearning for Zion Ranch looked like another slice of suburban America in the scrub brush, rows of neat homes, vegetable gardens, even a zip code. Yet inside the clapboard dwellings, red-robed women hummed hymns while tending rows of lettuce, and men in Stetsons studied church edicts beneath flickering bulbs. Children chased chickens under an unfinished amphitheater, their laughter dancing on warm breezes. Beneath that everyday hum, though, lay a darker rhythm, whispers of secret marriages and obedience to a leader so powerful he claimed divine right over every soul on the land. Fast forward to a silent Monday evening in March 2008. A lone voice cracks through a domestic violence hotline. She calls herself Sarah, says she's 16, trapped and abused. Her words tremble over the phone, setting off bells in an operator's mind. This isn't typical drama. The ranch turns into a puzzle of concern that no one can ignore, and by sunrise, the gears of state power start to grind. But what began as a single call would unleash something far bigger than anyone imagined. At 6 a.m. on April 3rd, the ranch's perimeter bulged with black-clad troopers and armored vehicles. Helicopter blades chopped the sky, dispatchers' radios crackled, and the scent of cold dust stung noses. Inside, the faithful blinked against harsh spotlights, robes billowing like red sails. Authorities moved methodically, searching every cabin, unsealing vaults, and finding more than a dozen safe deposit boxes of records. They uncovered evidence of underage spiritual unions and a stockpile of letters demanding total obedience. And in that moment, the ranch's silent walls began to speak. By day's end, more than 400 children were swept into waiting vans, their small hands trembling against worn teddy bears. Mothers watched through iron-barred gates as kids disappeared into the glare of white trucks, the sound of engines ticking like a countdown. The air tasted like tears and determination. Authorities vowed to protect, families vowed to fight. Whispered prayers mingled with the hum of engines, but no one knew which promise would hold. Inside courtrooms in San Angelo, lawyers hunched over documents thicker than cattle brands. Judges tapped gavels while state officials argued immediate risk, and FLDS attorneys insisted the raid was unjust, a violation of faith. Tension crackled like static before a storm, each side drawing battle lines over parental rights and religious liberty. One day, the Third Court of Appeals ordered children returned. The next, state lawyers filed emergency appeals, convinced danger still lurked. Each ruling felt like a round in a duel nobody could predict. By mid-2009, two-thirds of the families marched back to the plains, carrying folded letters of safety plans and fresh mistrust. Ranch roads rang with the clip-clop of returning pickup trucks, and children ran back to dusty fields, blinking under the same sun that once watched them leave. Yet the scars of separation lingered. Neighbors eyed each other with curiosity, some heads bowed in silent questions. The ranch resumed its hushed hum, but the old trust was gone, replaced by a cautious watchfulness. In 2011, from a prison cell in Palestine, Texas, Warren Jeffs, now convicted of child sexual assault, ordered followers to abandon YFZ Ranch. The sun-bleached cabins emptied, leaving ghostly rows of silent porches and empty wells. Wind whistled through unlatched doors, stirring old hymnals on floors thick with dust. By 2014, the state seized the property and handed care over to a sheriff who patrols its gravel roads, keeping the buildings from collapsing into desert sands. And yet, every creaking floorboard seems to whisper, power rose here once, and it could rise again. So what can we learn from this desert saga? First, watch for secret codes in everyday places, unexplained gates, staggered meeting times, off-grid financing. Second, notice when loyalty demands isolation from friends and family. And finally, remember that a single, trembling voice can change the course of thousands of lives when no one listens sooner. Up next, we'll peel back the layers on how everyday community centers and coffee shops can mask darker agendas, and reveal the 3 immediate questions you should ask when something feels off, long before headlines break. Stick around, because knowing what to look for can save the next generation from a hidden trap. Sex Abuse Expose in The Children of God, The Family International. If you want to peel back the veil on a smiling commune and walk away equipped to shield the vulnerable, keep watching. Picture a sunlit coffee house in Huntington Beach, California, 1968. Warm lights spilling across wooden tables, the scent of roasting beans mingling with hopeful laughter. David Berg, tall and smooth-talking, promised a return to early Christian purity. He spoke of heavenly revolutions as followers passed hymnals, their fingers brushing over inked pages like secret maps. At first, it felt like college friends chasing purpose, not prey. But that bright beginning would slowly twist into something far darker. By 1976, the group had rebranded itself as the Children of God, and flirty fishing became gospel. Imagine a dimly lit bar in London, orange neon flickering on cracked tiles. A red-robed follower, name tag pinned askew, hesitated before approaching a lonely stranger. She dabbed perfume on her wrists as if baptizing herself, then leaned in with a smile that felt both inviting and calculated. Her laughter danced over stale cigarette smoke while she offered salvation and her body to win new recruits. That delicate balance of faith and flirtation marked a turning point. Sex was no longer just worship, it was recruitment. Just 2 years later, Berg sent out a chilling directive in his MO letters. He argued that true devotion meant spiritual unions between adults and children over age 12, a phrase whispered in secret circles but etched in black and white ink. Close your eyes, and you can almost hear the rustle of pages in a Jamaican commune, night winds carrying hushed promises. A 12-year-old girl, her heart pounding like a distant drum, was led into a lantern-lit hut. There, she was told her innocence was a gateway to divine intimacy. The line between blessing and abuse vanished under those flickering flames. Inside these communes, ordinary chores masked unspeakable offenses. Laundry drums spun while children trembled in locked closets for asking questions. I remember a boy's voice quivering like brittle glass as he was dragged into a windowless room, punished with silence for naming the man who hurt him. His tears dripped onto cold concrete as the rest of the home sang benedictions in the next room. This was the cult's dirty secret. Confession meant obedience, not protection, and it thrived on terror dressed up as love. Despite mounting rumors, public scrutiny barely grazed the group for decades. They'd vanish into remote fields or shift names, the family of love, then simply the family, leaving fresh layers of secrecy. Only when survivors began finding hidden diaries did the truth claw its way into daylight. I can still see the moment a grown woman flips through yellowed pages, her eyes widening at detailed accounts of childhood betrayals. Each entry feels like a dagger. He told me I was special, then I wasn't sure who I could trust. Those diaries would become blueprints for investigators, proof that no sanctuary was safe. Today, former members speak out at conferences and online circles. Their voices, once muffled, now rise like a tide of warning signs. Grooming tactics, coded language, rigid loyalty tests. They share micro-hooks, phrases like God's chosen child or only we understand true covenant, that once lulled them into silence. Learning these whispers is crucial if you want to guard loved ones against hidden predators claiming divine license. Up next, we'll dissect the 3 immediate questions you must ask when someone demands unquestioning faith, and we'll walk through true-life examples of how tiny red flags went unnoticed until they couldn't be ignored. Stay tuned, because knowing the right questions can turn a whisper of danger into a full-blown rescue. Mass weddings and media backlash. Unification Church. If you want to see how a parade of white gowns in a stadium hit a deeper sway over millions, and walk away knowing how to spot when spectacle becomes control, stay with me. Picture a rain-slicked alley in Seoul, 1954, the sharp scent of street food mingling with the promise of a revolution in faith. Sun Myung-moon, lean and deliberate, stands before a handful of believers in a cramped back room, his voice cutting through the drizzle like a blade. He speaks of a world healed by covenant marriages, each union a building block in a grand divine plan. That spark would soon ignite into something nobody saw coming. Fast forward to 1961, a smoky gymnasium in Seoul. 36 couples, dressed in simple white gowns and dark suits, stand beneath a makeshift altar of carnations and tulle. The hum of murmured prayers fills the air, punctuated by the hiss of confetti cannons. As petals drift across the linoleum floor, each pair exchanges vows they barely understand. They leave hand in hand, hearts alight with hope, unaware that this ceremony will become the brand's signature spectacle. By the early 1970s, the movement crosses oceans. Imagine a suburban Washington ballroom, its chandeliers glowing soft gold. Rows of folding chairs creak under the weight of nervous laughter. A Japanese student presses her palms together, clutching a bouquet while cameras whirl overhead. A matchmaker in a crisp suit smiles, pronouncing her married to an American stranger. She nods, her pulse hammering like a distant drum. In that moment, faith and ritual merge into a ritual of expansion. But as these mass weddings multiply, from Tokyo's Nippon Budokan to Madison Square Garden, their glare attracts more than followers. In 1974, a Washington Post reporter, surrounded by stacks of steaming coffee cups and yellowing notes, types the headline, "Moonies tie the knot by the thousands." Outside the arena, skeptical onlookers hold placards calling the events cult weddings. The echo of camera shutters blends with chants, turning celebration into controversy. A decade later, the lights grow brighter. In the summer of 1982, Madison Square Garden hosts 10,000 couples. Floodlights sweep across red-carpeted aisles as a Korean elder's chant rolls through stadium speakers. Telephoto lenses capture every tear-streaked face. But behind the scenes, organizers tally subscription sales for the Washington Times. You marry, you subscribe, you donate. The lines between devotion and transaction blur under the stadium's glare. Stories emerge of under-the-table donations. A midwife in rural Ohio recalls a 3 a.m. knock on her kitchen door, moonlight slicing through storm clouds. She finds a courier in a windbreaker holding manila envelopes stuffed with cash. He whispers that every member must contribute 4 months' salary to bless the next mass wedding. She hands over her savings, the weight of guilt heavier than the bills themselves. In Japan, the spectacle collides with grief. After former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's assassination in 2022, investigators uncover that his alleged killer blamed the church for family ruin. Millions drained in fundraising efforts tied to mass weddings. Once proud parents sift through bank statements stained with tears, tracing each transaction back to a confetti-filled altar. Public outrage swells as media outlets broadcast images of happy couples alongside footage of empty wallets. By the 2000s, social media adds turbocharged criticism. Scrolling through TikTok, you see hundreds of quick cuts, brides tossing bouquets, ministers pronouncing holy bloodlines, then cut to angry ex-members warning of financial ruin. Hashtags like #MoonMassacre and #CultWeddings trend globally. Yet diehard followers post rebuttals, live streaming ceremonies with rose petals cascading in slow-mo. It becomes a digital tug-of-war where faith, money, and spectacle collide in the palm of your hand. So what can we learn from this saga of mass weddings and media backlash? First, notice when joy comes with a price tag. If a celebration demands huge donations or media loyalty, pause before you pledge. Second, watch who controls the narrative. When organizations own newspapers or broadcast channels, they shape what you're allowed to see. And finally, remember that grand ceremonies can mask small coercions. A whisper about destiny can become a shout demanding obedience. In our next chapter, we'll pull back the curtain on 3 everyday events, community fairs, charity galas, even corporate retreats, that might be hiding the same playbook. We'll give you the exact questions to ask when a gathering dazzles your senses and demands your wallet, so you can shine a light on any hidden agenda before you sign on the dotted line. Stick around, you won't want to miss it. Raelian Movement Cloning Hoax. If you want to discover how a promise of eternal life became one of the biggest scientific cons, and walk away knowing exactly how to spot glossy claims before they fool you, stay right here. Imagine a cool December morning in 1973, the air crisp on a French volcanic ridge, when Claude Vorilhon, later known as Rael, says he saw a gleaming craft descend from the stars. He felt a soft hum under his feet and smelled ozone swirling around a silver door. An alien voice told him that humans were created by advanced scientists called the Elohim. That single encounter planted a seed of wonder that would soon sprout into a global movement. Fast forward to 1975, under a lantern's glow in a Parisian loft, a handful of curious followers gathered around Rael's trembling voice. He described floating through corridors of light aboard an alien ship and glimpsing laboratories older than our earliest cities. His words hung in the air like perfume, simple yet intoxicating. One day, we'd unlock the secret to eternal life through cloning. Patriotic students and lonely dreamers leaned in, eyes bright with hope. And right then, a new mission was born. By 1997, that mission had a name, Clonaid, and a small lab in West Virginia. Picture fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, stainless steel basins lined up like silent sentries, and biochemist Brigitte Boisselier in a crisp lab coat, her breath leaving tiny clouds as she stepped inside. The promise was sweet. The first human clone was within reach. Private investors slipped crisp bills into manila envelopes, eager to taste immortality. Yet as machines hummed and freezers clicked shut, the science still whispered back an empty answer. On a chilly December day in 2002, Boisselier took the stage into the Bahamas, salty breeze mingling with camera flashes. She clutched a microphone and announced, "We have done it. The first cloned baby, Eve, is born and healthy." Applause rippled across the crowd like little waves. Yet when reporters asked for a glimpse of Eve, doors stayed tightly shut. Crickets chirped in empty hallways. And behind every raised eyebrow, a quiet doubt began to grow. Weeks later, in a wood-paneled room of the U.S. Congress, senators leaned forward on polished desks. The scent of old leather and coffee lingered as experts pressed Boisselier for proof. Where was Eve? DNA tests? Hospital records? Her answers drifted out like smoke. Promises of future disclosure, hints about privacy, but no clear evidence. Each unanswered question felt like a loose thread pulling at the movement's tapestry of belief. As headlines faded and investors knocked on empty offices, former followers sifted through bank statements stained with devotion. They remembered the hush of lab corridors and the thrill of speaking Rael's name like a password to paradise. Many felt foolish, their faith folded up like a crumpled letter. Yet from their stories came clear warnings. When a grand promise dangles just out of reach, ask for proof in plain sight and watch who truly holds the keys. So what can we learn from the Raelian cloning hoax? First, notice when bold claims lean on secrecy. Science thrives on open doors, not locked labs. Second, demand simple proof before you invest your time, money, or trust. And finally, follow the money trail. When donations and subscriptions fuel a spectacle, you're often funding the show more than the science. Up next, we'll dive into the exact warning signs of modern-day pseudoscience, from flashy wellness retreats to viral social media gurus, and teach you 3 simple questions that can stop a hoax in its tracks. Make sure you stick around, because knowing what to ask today could save you from tomorrow's big con. Disconnection and Defector Stories, Church of Scientology. If you want to uncover how a single whispered decree can sever hearts and learn the exact signs to guard your own, stay right here. Late one evening in a suburban kitchen, a man finds a pale envelope slipped under his door. The air smells of fresh paint and silence. Inside, typed words declare his closest friend suppressive, ordering him to cut all ties. His hands tremble as the letter falls like a guillotine blade, ending years of Sunday lunches and bedtime stories in one stroke. Back in 1965, Ron Hubbard penned a policy that turned love into a threat. In a dusty office tucked behind a Hollywood storefront, clerks passed around a thick memo calling critics suppressive persons. The paper crackled between fingers like old parchment, its words reshaping entire families. And that document became the seed of disconnection, planting a barrier so simple that no one saw it until it was too late. Imagine a bright studio backlit in 2013, cameras rolling, where Leah Remini asked why Shelley Miscavige was never seen at celebrity galas. The scent of hot lights mingled with coffee as crew members froze. When she pushed for answers, the response was a chill whisper, "You lack the rank to ask." In that moment, a devotion turned to doubt, and Remini became her own worst-case defector. Weeks later, she learned she'd been branded a suppressive person, her name whispered in security briefings and dotted across sealed files. The hum of her voicemail greeted her with silence. Friends vanished like mist, and every call became a reminder that speaking out carries its own price. And that mark would follow her for years. In Clearwater, Florida, Mike Rinder remembers the smell of bleach on steel doors as he entered The Hole, the church's secret detention block. The echo of his footsteps against concrete walls felt louder than any sermon. He spent months stripped of status, pleading for a word of mercy that never came. It was a prison built from rigid loyalty and silent cages. One rain-soaked night in London, Rinder slipped onto a tube car, the rumble of wheels beneath him like a promise of escape. Water dripped from an overhead vent as the doors hissed shut. With each stop, the bright station lights seemed to push back the darkness of his past. In that fleeting journey, he tasted freedom for the first time in decades. Marty Rathbun felt it too, sitting in a windowless ethics boardroom, the soft beep of an e-meter like a ticking clock. He watched higher-ups scribble notes as he confessed doubts. The air smelled of stale coffee and expectation. When he questioned orders, a handwritten memo appeared next to his files. Declare Rathbun suppressive. What began as a routine audit ended as a sentence to exile. His wife of 10 years held a packed suitcase in their living room, the scent of lavender sachets mingling with tears. She chose loyalty to the church over the man she loved. As the sunlight faded behind her back, Marty realized disconnection wasn't just policy. It was a blade that cut through every promise he'd ever made. Children understood it best. A little girl, clutching her favorite doll, found a note stuck to her bedroom mirror. "Mom is dead to you." The room smelled of crayons and heartbreak. She stared at the words until they blurred, learning too soon how faith can become a weapon when it demands complete obedience. Today, empty chairs sit at once crowded dinner tables, and voicemail boxes hum with unanswered calls. In quiet homes where laughter once danced on corners, the hush of disconnection hangs heavier than any sermon. Families learn the hard way that silence can echo louder than any shout. So, how do you spot it before the walls close in? First, ask, who decides who I can speak to? Second, what happens if I question this rule? And third, is loyalty ever allowed to coexist with love? These simple questions can shine a light on any hidden decree and stop a severed bond from becoming permanent. Up next, we'll peel back the curtain on 3 everyday conversations you might overlook and show you the exact words that can keep invisible chains from wrapping around your own life. Make sure you stay tuned. You don't want to miss how silence can become the loudest alarm. Free love commune and mysterious deaths, the Source family. If you want to discover how a health food hotspot became a free love kingdom shrouded in odd deaths, and walk away knowing the red flags of a dream turned dark, stay right here. Picture April 1st, 1969, on the Sunset Strip, the air buzzing with neon lights and the scent of alfalfa sprouts drifting through the Source restaurant. Jim Baker, lean and confident, greets diners with a soft smile as wooden bowls clatter and clinking glasses hum like a promise. He talks of natural living and shared meals, and Hollywood stars lean in, tasting vegan curry beneath swaying palms. Those warm first nights planted the seed of something bigger, a commune where freedom felt like sunlight. But every spark has a shadow waiting to grow. Fast forward to a 3-story mansion in the Hollywood Hills called the Mother House. Inside, robes of linen brush against polished floors, incense curls through lamplit hallways, and laughter drifts over piles of patchouli-stained cushions. 40 young adults live and work as one. They share chores, meals, and sometimes more. Arranged marriages dissolve into open circles, where partners change as easily as moon phases. The air tastes of hope and spice. Yet behind each closed door, hushed whispers note tension rising. And there lies the first clue that free love can come with a silent cost. Behind the mansion's rose-stained walls, music fills a dusty attic. Yehovah 13, the commune's band, cranks out swirling chords under dim red bulbs. Vinyl discs spin like ritual wheels, and raw recordings pulse through rattling speakers. Followers dance barefoot on frayed rugs, bodies swaying to lyrics about unity and stars. Yet when outsiders ask to hear the tapes, they're met with gentle refusals and sudden schedule changes. Those vanished sessions became legend, an echo of art guarding a secret, hinting that some stories are meant to stay locked away. In 1974, a warm trade wind carried the family to Hawaii. They settled by a palm-shaded cliff and painted a grand house white, draping banana leaves over wooden decks. Morning sun sparkles on turquoise waves as members chant beside hibiscus blooms. New beginnings taste of salt and mango juice. But in twilight hush, a lone figure still wanders moonlit gardens, tracing patterns in the sand. Island Paradise carried a deeper calm, an attention that rippled beneath coconut palms, waiting for the right moment to surface. On August 25, 1975, Father Yod climbed a grassy bluff at dawn, the mist clinging to his hang glider like a promise of flight. The air smelled of damp earth and hibiscus as he leapt into sky, cloth wings catching a golden breeze. Moments later, the glider crashed hard on the beach below, no witnesses, just the thunder of impact and a lone cry carried off by the surf. 9 hours later, he was gone, his ash scattered in the tide, leaving behind a hush so deep it still rings louder than any chant. After Father Yod's fall, smaller deaths began to murmur through the camp. A young wife found silent in a lavender-scented bath, a teacher lost to a sudden fever in a sunlit bungalow, journals left open on empty pillows. Each passing was met with ritual songs and whispered prayers under candlelight. No autopsies, no firm goodbye, just the gentle closing of doors. These quiet endings slipped into the margins of family lore, vanishing as quickly as morning mist at sunrise. Today, old photos and tattered scrapbooks resurface like half-remembered dreams. Fans press vinyl reissues of Yehovah 13 into the hands of curious newcomers, tasting the commune's wild hopes in scratchy grooves. But the same breath that carried songs of unity once blew wind through empty rooms, stirring up stories no one wants to forget. And from this tale, we learn, when devotion asks you to lock your doubts away, it might already be closing the doors on your own safety. Next, we'll step into modern wellness retreats, those bubbly juice bars and sunrise yoga rituals, where hidden rules and hush-hush fees live under the guise of self-care. I'll show you 3 simple questions to ask before you sign up for any Paradise Promise, so you can keep the light on in every room you enter. Stick around. You won't want to miss how to spot the trap before you unpack your bags. Violence, the game, and breakup, Synanon. If you want to learn how a so-called healing circle turned into a savage ritual, and walk away knowing the warning signs before it's too late, stay right here. Picture a sunlit room in 1960s Santa Monica, the air heavy with incense and the murmur of hopeful chatter. Charles Dederick stands at the front, voice calm but firm, inviting newcomers into a circle of wooden chairs. At first, it feels like friendly talk therapy. Members confess fears, share dreams, and pass around mugs of lukewarm coffee. But behind those soft smiles, a darker promise lingers, that this group will strip away every lie you tell yourself. no matter the cost. By the early 1970s, the game had become Synanon's crown jewel, a thrice-weekly showdown where one person stands, voice quivering, while the rest unleash volleys of verbal blows. Close your eyes, and you can almost hear the echo of taunts ricocheting off bare walls. Laughter one moment, cruel jeers the next. The room smells of sweat and coffee, every chair a silent witness to broken confidence as friends trade compassion for cruelty in the name of truth. Then came the shift from words to fists. In hushed corridors, newcomers shared hushed warnings about midnight beatings led by a paramilitary group called the Imperial Marines. Imagine slipping into a cold steel garage, the echo of boots on concrete, and feeling the sting of a leather strap carving fear into your skin. Each lash taught you to obey without question, and when you hesitated, the strap came down harder. But abuse wasn't limited to the game. In the heart of Synanon's headquarters, couples woke to find their vows invalidated by a typed note. Your marriage is dissolved. The air in that bedroom cooled as hearts froze. Rings tossed into drawers, photographs torn from albums, and partners told to choose new spouses on a moment's notice. The fragrance of jasmine on a wedding dress turned sour when freedom became a command. Outside the compound, the violence spilled into the streets. In 1978, a rattlesnake, defanged but still terrifying, was left coiled in the mailbox of an attorney who dared expose Synanon's dark side. The hiss of scaled skin against metal echoed the croak of silence that followed. Friends vanished, files disappeared, and rumors claimed the snakebite was just the beginning. Fear wrapped around the neighborhood like a cold wind, chilling even the sunniest days. Inside those same walls, members whispered of broken bones and bruised faces hidden by long sleeves. One man survived a midnight session that ended with his nose shattered on a wooden chair. He recalls the shock of warm blood pooling on threadbare carpeting, the clang of kitchen utensils hitting the floor as others scattered in fear. That stain of crimson taught him the cost of speaking up, his silence sealed with every crack of bone. By 1991, news outlets branded Synanon one of the most violent cults America had ever seen. Courtrooms reeked of coffee and stale tobacco as judges listened to testimony about forced vasectomies, unmarked graves, and life-threatening orders. Dederick, once hailed as a rehabilitation pioneer, was expelled from his own creation while members watched doors slam shut on his final exit. So how do you spot a game before it breaks you? First, notice if a group tells you the only path to truth is through public humiliation. Second, watch for rules that dissolve personal bonds. If they command you to sever ties, they're commanding your freedom. And third, beware when a leader surrounds themselves with an armed guard of enforcers, whispering of punishment for any dissent. Up next, we'll peel back the curtain on 3 everyday wellness circles that borrow Synanon's darkest tactics, and I'll share the exact phrases you need to ask before you ever take a seat. Stick around, because knowing the right questions can keep you out of the firing line. Family estrangement and polyamory, the Sullivanians. If you want to learn how a promise of boundless love can leave kids with no one to call family, and walk away knowing exactly when freedom becomes a hidden cage, stay right here. Picture a narrow brownstone on New York's Upper West Side in the early 1960s, sunlight spilling through tall windows onto hardwood floors. A handful of therapists and artists gather, the scent of strong coffee and leather-bound case notes mingling like a quiet invitation. Saul Newton and Jane Pierce, voices steady and warm, talk about a world without rigid family ties, where people form bonds by choice, not by birth. That soft idea took root in rich minds craving a new start, and before long, it spread beneath the city's sidewalks like a winding vine. Fast forward a few years to a lively dinner party in a candlelit loft. Plates of buttered asparagus and bowls of brown rice steam under hanging lamps. Couples cluster on cushions, laughter rising with the clink of glasses. Someone mentions polyamory in a hushed tone, as if it's an exciting secret. Partners shift easily from one heart to the next, pooling their time and emotions without asking permission. It feels like warmth, like finding more hands to hold on a chilly night. But behind that cozy glow, the roots of estrangement began to twist around everyone connected by blood. In one small apartment, A girl named Claire sits cross-legged on a rug stained with paint spills. She traces names on a family tree drawn in colored pencil. Mother here, father there, and then dozens of other faces connected by looping lines. No one lives with blood parents anymore. Every parent moves between homes like an echo. Claire closes her eyes and breathes in the faint scent of crayons and dust. She wonders where she truly belongs when her family shifts as often as the hours on the clock. That uncertainty is the first crack in a child's heart. Down the street, in a dimly lit basement, rows of folding chairs face a low stage draped in velvet. Members gather for a weekly meeting called Chumship Circle. A single bulb casts long shadows on the walls. One by one, people confess jealousy or longing, their voices echoing through the hush. When someone questions the constant partner rotations, they're met with firm smiles and reminders that love cannot be owned. Yet every time a marriage vow dissolves, tears dry on cheeks, rings tumble from shaking fingers. It's another cord cut from a child's sense of stability. By the mid-1970s, more than 300 Sullivanians lived together across Manhattan townhouses and summer retreats. The air in each home smells of incense and cooking oil. Beds overflow with mismatched quilts, and doorways stand open as if inviting the world inside. But when a therapist orders a child to brush their teeth at a neighbor's house, or tells them they cannot visit non-Sullivanian grandparents, that dreamy openness turns into a soft, confining wall. Children learn early that family means loyalty to the group, not to the people who gave them their first words and first steps. Then came the day when the group's finances unraveled. Jane Pierce and Saul Newton's secret bank accounts lay exposed, their carefully cultivated polyamorous utopia revealed as a system that funneled money to the leaders and left many families scrambling. Couples who thought they were sharing hearts and wallets found themselves cut off overnight, evicted from their apartments, denied access to children who had been reassigned to new parents in the commune. I remember the heavy march of feet on a winter sidewalk as a mother in a wool coat carried a small suitcase, her face set between hope and heartbreak as she tried to find her son in a sea of strangers. In the end, the Sullivanians closed their doors in 1991, leaving hushed houses and empty cradles behind. Former children, now adults, search dusty archives for birth records, looking for the names of parents they barely remember. They speak of the moment they met their biological mothers, a door creaking open, the faint scent of dried flowers, and the sudden rush of years unspooling in tears. That fragile reunion reminds us how fragile roots can be when they're torn from the soil. So how do you spot this pattern before it sprouts in your own life? First, listen for the line that tells you to cut off old ties. That's the first blade in a hidden knife. Second, notice if partners change as often as the weather. Stable love rarely means constant swapping. Third, watch what happens to children. Are they given a home, or are they moved like chess pieces? Asking these 3 questions can help you guard your heart and your loved ones. Up next, we'll step into today's wellness retreats and social clubs to reveal the same subtle moves, how gentle words can lock you in, and what questions you need to ask before you ever hand over your trust. Stick around, because knowing these signs can keep you from losing more than just your heart. Torch and Machete Killings, New Light of God, Panama. Ever wondered how a spark of faith can scorch an entire village and leave its people forever changed? Stick with me, and I'll guide you step by step through a ritual so chilling it still echoes in the rainforest. Picture a tiny hamlet called El Terran, cradled by thick green vines and the constant hum of cicadas. When the sun slipped behind the palms, only the soft glow of kerosene lamps lit the hut doorways. It was here that a newcomer arrived with a wild hope in his eyes, promising salvation, and nothing would ever be the same. Meet Mario Gonzalez, a man in his 40s who strolled back into town one humid evening carrying a battered Bible and stories of visions. Villagers remembered the strange hush that fell when he began to preach, like the jungle itself paused to listen. But behind his calm smile, a darker purpose was stirring. One night, under a full moon peeling silver through the leaves, Mario claimed God spoke to him in a voice like distant thunder. He said every soul in El Terran had a debt to pay for hidden sins, and only blood could wipe the slate clean. The next morning, he and a handful of followers nailed a crude sign to a leaning post. Nueva Luz de Dios. Word spread like sparks in dry grass. Soon, families gathered in an open clearing where torches lined a path through banana palms. The air tasted of damp earth and promise, and for a moment, hope felt possible. But Mario had more than prayers in mind. Inside a makeshift shed of split wood and woven palm fronds, the sect's preachers herded villagers like sheep. A pregnant woman, 5 of her little ones, and even a weary grandfather found themselves blindfolded and forced to grab each other's hands. The scent of sweat and fear tangled with the smoke curling from the torch tips. Then came the heat. Mario's followers built a shallow pit of glowing embers at the center of the floor. A trembling child stepped onto the stones, shrieking as hot coals kissed bare skin. In the dim light, machetes flashed like hungry animals ready to strike. And when someone faltered, the blade fell with a sickening thud. By dawn, 7 bodies lay draped in stained hammocks, 6 children and 1 brave mother, wrapped together in a silent embrace. The only sound was the drip of sweat from leaf to leaf as the jungle reclaimed its stillness. But the cries of survivors broke that spell. One young boy, mud caked on his knees, crawled to the edge of the clearing and begged for help. His voice cracked like dry wood. A neighbor who slipped away raced through tangled undergrowth to find a riverboat, heart hammering, while a mother scooped up her bleeding daughter and ran barefoot into the darkness. Rescue came on the wings of a patrol boat cutting through morning mist. Officers found 11 more villagers bound with cords of woven grass, their limbs sore and spirits shaken. The air smelled of diesel and wet bark as the wounded were ferried toward the distant town of Santiago. Back in El Terran, the news landed like a collapsing tree. Families wept at graves with no headstones, and elders spoke of trust shattered beneath the swirl of yesterday's prayers. Yet questions burned brighter than any torch. How could faith turn so fierce? And who would stand guard against such cruelty next time? In court, 9 members of Nueva Luz de Dios faced hushed spectators in wooden pews. Each plea echoed through an empty chamber, voices low but firm. Panama's judges handed down decades of prison for the worst offenders, measures meant to soothe aching hearts. But could paper and gavel ever heal open wounds? Today, the village remains wrapped in verdant silence, broken only by distant roosters and the rustle of lizards in the underbrush. New light of God is gone, but its ghost still drifts among the palms. Locals pray differently now, cautious prayers whispered beneath their breath, carrying both hope and the memory of a night when the jungle wept. So, what drives a simple community to the edge of darkness? And how can we guard our own sparks of belief against becoming flames of fear? In our next story, we'll step into another heart of shadow and light, where hope and horror collide once more. Ritual rape and murder, Black Jesus cult, Papua New Guinea. Have you ever wondered how a man could twist faith into a weapon so cruel it stole the innocence of a child? Stick around, and I'll take you inside a jungle nightmare where blind trust became a ritual of horror, and show you how a single spark of courage broke the cycle. Picture a humid night in Madong province, the air heavy with the sweet scent of damp earth and orchids. A stranger emerged from the palms, dressed in a white robe that brushed wet leaves. His name was Stephen Tari, but soon they would call him Black Jesus. He spoke in a low voice that seemed to ride on the wind, promising riches from heaven. The villagers leaned in close, drawn by hope as sharp as the machetes they carried deep in the brush. Yet beneath his calm words lay a hunger no prayer could satisfy. Meet Rita Herman, a bright-eyed girl of just 14, chosen to be one of his flower girls. In the soft glow of a flickering lantern, she wore petals pinned to her hair and a thin cotton dress that clung to her in the night air. They led her into a canvas tent heavy with the smell of sweat and candle wax. Rita believed she would be blessed, that her life would bloom. But that night, in the hushed dark, faith turned on her like a blade. Inside that tent, the dry rustle of palms faded to a single, steady breath. Stephen stood before Rita, hands trembling as they closed around her wrists. She tasted the iron tang of fear. He whispered prayers between each cruel act, weaving scripture and violence as one. And when her voice cracked in a final scream, the world outside held its breath. Who would ever see the line between worship and wickedness? The morning sun found Rita's body beneath the palms, petals scattered like fallen stars. Rumors spread faster than a river in flood. Neighbors whispered by firelight, voices shaking like leaves in a storm. Some spoke of blood mixed with coconut milk, others of chants that sounded like broken cries. Yet for every fearful soul who fled, there was another who clung tighter to Black Jesus's words, convinced only he could save them. It wasn't long before the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary arrived, boots sinking into red clay as they tracked Stephen's trail of fear. Villagers guided the officers through twisting roots and tangled vines, each step echoing a heartbeat. They found him in a makeshift camp where young girls knelt by bamboo poles, their eyes hollow with belief. A tense standoff crackled like static in the air. One wrong move, and the jungle would erupt in gunfire. Bound and silent, Stephen faced the court in Madong. The wooden walls smelled of dust and dread. For counts of rape were laid at his feet, each one a dropped petal, a stolen life. He stood in robes now stained with more than sweat, head bowed beneath the weight of his crimes. Yet when the gavel fell, some in the room still whispered that he was the true Christ, that the verdict was a test of faith itself. Guards led him away, iron doors clanging like a shutter in the dark. For 3 years, the walls of Beyond Prison held him tight, but the jungle never truly forgets a voice that powerful. One night in March, under a blanket of stars and the distant chorus of frogs, Stephen slipped free, disappearing into the green maze he knew so well. Behind him, chains clinked and alarms wailed, but his laughter rode the humid air. When news of his escape spread, panic bloomed in every village. Parents herded children indoors, and even the roosters fell silent. Flashlights carved shaky beams through the gloom as machete-wielding neighbors formed search parties. Each footstep felt like a heartbeat ticking closer to doom. Would they find him before he found another girl? Or would the jungle reclaim another life in its dark embrace? Days later, a call crackled over a battered radio. He'd been spotted near Gal Village, dragging a struggling woman through the underbrush. Furious villagers armed themselves with axes, bush knives, anything that could cut through fear. Under a lone mango tree, they cornered him. The sharp tang of sweat and blood rose as the mob descended. Some say his last words were a prayer. Others say he begged for mercy. Either way, the forest fell silent when the blows stopped. They buried him at the edge of the clearing, the red clay closing over a story too grim for daylight. In the hush that followed, survivors gathered around small fires, offering soft prayers that mixed tears and relief. Mothers clutched their daughters close, humming lullabies through cracked voices. The jungle breathed again, but the memory of steel and screams lingered in every rustling leaf. So what can we learn from this dark chapter where faith became a cage? In our next story, we'll step into a different world where hope and fear dance on the edge of a knife, and discover how one simple question can brighten the darkest path. Satanic rumors and strange rituals. Process Church of the Final Judgment. Ever felt a chill when someone whispers that faith can hide a darker truth? Stay with me, and you'll see how a group once shrouded in holy robes became the subject of whispers no one could ignore. Imagine a damp London basement in 1966, the faint scent of old wood mingling with the hum of a tape recorder. Robert and Mary Ann, both fresh from Scientology, sat cross-legged on threadbare rugs. They called their new group Compulsions Analysis, promising a path to inner truth. But as Mary Ann spoke of voices guiding her, the air felt electric, like someone had flipped a switch in the dark. Hold that thought, because those voices were only the first note in a much stranger song. Soon, the couple packed crates of Bibles and strange candles and headed to a ruined villa on Mexico's Yucatan coast. Picture tangled jungle vines pressing against broken tile floors, and every corner alive with bird calls at dawn. There, Robert claimed he met 4 great ones: Jehovah, Lucifer, Satan, and Christ, each revealing a piece of a coming end. Villagers remember the sharp crackle of a shortwave radio as they channeled messages, and the sweet sting of incense that never seemed to burn out. But this remote outpost was just the stage for headlines to follow. By 1967, the Process Church of the Final Judgment had chapters in London, New York, and Los Angeles. On Sunset Boulevard, Hooded members in black robes handed out slick magazines titled Sex, Fear, and Death. Imagine strolling past neon signs, only to meet a silent figure offering a glossy pamphlet on the game of the gods. The hum of street traffic faded as you flipped through pages filled with cryptic symbols and bold claims. And that's where the rumors took hold, because when Hollywood lights gleam, shadows grow longer. Whispers started that Mick Jagger dropped by a purple-lit chapel on Hollywood Boulevard, intrigued by talk of Lucifer as the god of passion. A makeup artist swears she saw Charles Manson scribbling notes in the margins of a Process magazine. The air smelled of stale popcorn and cheap perfume in those theaters, and a rumor spread that late-night listeners caught a secret broadcast, chanting voices promising the final judgment. Stick around, because in a moment I'll share the tale of that midnight broadcast that left families dialing the police in panic. Out on an abandoned ranch near Utah's Red Rocks, another story took shape. Locals spoke of low chanting behind barbed wire fences, the bleat of startled goats, and a coppery tang in the desert air. One ranch hand, Ellie, told me she peeked through a broken board and saw hooded figures circling a small fire. Their whispered vows felt like ice sliding down her spine. Yet the Process Church insisted these were symbolic acts meant to awaken the soul, not harm animals. But every pact had its doubters, and every question only fueled the fire of gossip. In their magazines, each issue felt like a new chapter in a detective novel. The sex issue promised liberation through ritual, while the fear issue warned that most people lived in a fog of everyday dullness. By the time the death issue hit newsstands, rumors soared. Some said it featured photos of black hooded members carrying Hamlets on poles. In a smoky backroom of a Los Angeles record store, strangers swapped stories about hidden symbols painted on hillsides. And every time the story ended, a new question jumped out. What really goes on when the lights go out? Then, almost overnight, the whispered horror gave way to something gentle. The black robes vanished, replaced by denim jackets and the smell of fresh hay. The Process Church folded its tents and re-emerged as Best Friends Animal Sanctuary in Utah, now one of the largest no-kill havens in America. Visitors today hear the soft bleat of lambs instead of chanting, and the only fire burns in a wood stove kettle. Yet some corners of the old ranch still echo with rumors of hidden cellars and dusty ritual objects. Could the past be buried so deep that no one would ever find it? So why does this story grip us years later? Because it shows how easily hope can slip into fear and how whispers can spark legends. In our next journey, we'll step into another fringe world where the promise of truth becomes the color of night, and find out what happens when belief is pushed beyond any limit. Stay close, because the next secret is just a whisper away. Child molestation convictions, Nawabian Nation. Ever wanted to see how a promise of freedom can hide the darkest betrayals? Stick with me, and you'll uncover the single truth that turned sanctuary into a prison, and learn how a spark of courage broke the silence. Picture a warm summer evening in Bushwick, Brooklyn, the scent of sizzling grills drifting from stoops, laughter bouncing off brick walls. In the crowd stood a tall man named Dwight Malachi York, draped in colorful dashikis, voice rich and inviting. He preached black empowerment and cosmic destiny, and every word felt like a promise of safety. Families crowded his rented hall, believing they'd found a protector. But behind York's magnetic smile, a secret storm was gathering. One small voice would soon shatter the illusion for good. Fast forward to 1993. Imagine winding down a dusty Georgia highway, red clay under worn tires, until pyramid-shaped gates loom into view. York had uprooted hundreds of followers and built Tamari, an Egyptian-themed refuge where alabaster obelisks shimmered at dawn. Children chased chickens through courtyards of carved sphinxes, while elders studied York's sprawling tomes beneath date palms. The air tasted of lilac incense and ripe peaches, and every sunset felt like the world itself had paused to worship. But hope turned brittle when whispers of fear crept through those painted columns. Meet Nikki, a girl of 11, with braids dancing as she ran barefoot across cool tile floors. She remembered York's soft hum as he greeted her in his private chambers, a room redolent of frankincense and leather-bound books. One afternoon, he closed the door behind them, voice low and gentle. He told her it was a sacred tradition, a ritual to prepare her for greatness. Her skin pricked with confusion and cold dread. When she finally escaped the hush of that room, her small hands trembling, she carried a secret too heavy for words. Back in Eatonton, Georgia, neighbors noticed odd rhythms. Late-night convoys of dark vans, whispered rumors of children disappearing into locked trailers, and followers shushing questions with harsh eyes. Journalists came sniffing around the compound's edges, pins itching. It wasn't long before federal agents joined the watch, boots crunching gravel under moonlight, flashlights carving teeth-shaped shadows. They gathered testimony from brimming notebooks and tear-streaked faces, each page another crack in York's kingdom of sand and lies. The breaking point arrived on May 8, 2002. Dawn found more than 300 officers storming Tomarese gates like a thunderclap. The smell of gasoline from overturned generators mixed with damp hay from nearby barns. Children sheltered under tatty quilts, eyes wide as officers herded them to safety. They hauled York away in handcuffs. The man once crowned Chief Black Thunderbird Eagle reduced to a figure of stunned disbelief. In that moment, the compound's painted stones lost their shimmer, and the world learned that sometimes idols bleed. Inside a packed courtroom months later, sunlight poured through tall windows, dust motes dancing over carved pews. Prosecutors laid out 197 counts, transporting minors across state lines for sex, conspiracy, racketeering, and child molestation stretching back decades. Victims recounted stolen innocence, stories punctuated by hushed sobs and the metallic echo of a gavel. York's face stayed calm as he pleaded guilty to 77 state charges and several federal counts. The hush that followed his admission was heavier than any prayer. When the judge spoke the sentence, 135 years behind bars, it landed like a thunderbolt in every heart. Families in the gallery wept soft tears, some held hands. Others stared at the polished wood as if it held answers. York, once a savior in flashy robes, now slid toward the defense table, head bowed beneath chains of his own making. The oppressive heat of that summer gallery seemed to vanish, replaced by a chill born of justice served too late for many. Today, Tomarese stands empty, paint peeling from gates, winds chime silent against cracked statues. Survivors whisper that every evening breeze still carries a trace of incense and broken dreams. But in quiet homes across Georgia, those once silenced voices reclaim power, sharing stories to shield others from the same shadows. Their courage is the true legacy of a place built on deception. So what can we learn when devotion becomes a prison and charisma turns to cruelty? In our next story, we'll journey into another world where blind faith meets ruthless ambition and discover the single question that can save us all. Stay close, because the next truth is waiting in the dark. Cargo worship and gift-giving, John Frum Movement, Vanuatu. Ever wanted to see how a spark of hope can turn a remote island into a stage for painted flags and bamboo runways? Stick around, and I'll show you how belief became a living ritual, and how you can carry that same spark into your own life. Picture a moonlit night on Tanna Island in the 1930s, the air thick with kava's bitter sweetness and the soft hum of cicadas. Village elders sat cross-legged on woven mats, sipping the earthy brew that made their thoughts drift. Then, through the haze, a figure appeared, a tall man in uniform, face half lit by torchlight. He spoke of a promise. "Return to your ways," he said, "and I'll bring you the world's gifts." That vision of John Frum, a spirit soldier from America, hung in the air like a souvenir you couldn't quite touch. Hold on to that feeling, because it was only the first step. Fast forward to World War II. Imagine waking before dawn to the rumble of jeeps and the hiss of landing planes. Canned food and radios spilled from supply crates like magic. The sun glinted off metal surfaces, and suddenly, John Frum's promise felt real. Islanders watched in awe as soldiers piled out boxes of tools and toys, their uniforms bright against the green hills. The taste of salt from coconut palms mingled with diesel in the air. In that moment, cargo was no longer just goods. It was proof that John Frum's words could come alive. As the war ended and the Americans left, a hush fell over the beaches. No more roaring engines. No more box trucks rumbling past. And with that silence came a fierce resolve. Villagers built bamboo airstrips on flat ground, lining them with white shells and painted markers. They hoisted American flags on tall poles carved from palm trunks, each stitch of cloth catching the breeze like a heartbeat. At dawn, barefoot men in hand-sewn uniforms marched in perfect lines, their bamboo rifles clicking like slow thunder. When drums began and the earth seemed to pulse beneath their feet, everyone felt a moment of magic. Perhaps the plains would return after all. Every February 15th, Tanna turns into a living tapestry of gift-giving and worship. Imagine palm frond kiosks piled with yams, woven baskets brimming with fish, and jars of kava ready to share. Children dart between tents, noses sticky with sticky mango juice. Drummers call the crowd to a central clearing where elders raise a crisp American flag, fingers brushing the fabric like a prayer. Then the rituals begin, dances that mimic engine thrusts, chants that beckon distant cargo ships, and bows to the spirit soldier who still might bring abundance. Gifts change hands with smiles and quiet nods, beans for textiles, shells for tools, each offering a prayer for prosperity. But this isn't just a festival, it's a living lesson in belief and unity. When villagers work together to plant gardens, build terraces, or repair that bamboo runway, they find strength in shared purpose. The rituals remind them that hope is not a passive wish, but a gentle fuel for community action. And even as modern life slips into that quiet jungle, solar panels humming, cell phones lighting up pockets, John Frum's message lingers: hold on to your customs, share what you have, and never lose faith in tomorrow's promise. In the hush between drums and applause, you can almost hear that first kava-scented vision whisper, you are part of something bigger. And that idea travels beyond Tanna's shores. Whether you're gathered around a backyard bonfire or texting friends across town, you can weave tiny rituals of your own, small acts of kindness that become threads in a tapestry of hope. So next time you long for a spark in your own world, remember the painted flags and bamboo runways of Tanna. Craft your own runway of shared moments. Offer your gifts, time, laughter, kindness, and watch how belief can transform ordinary spaces into scenes of wonder. In our next story, we'll journey to a forgotten cave where flickering torchlight reveals secrets etched in stone, and find out what treasure lies hidden in the darkness. Stay close, because the next spark of discovery is just around the bend. Parody turned obsession, Church of the Subgenius. Ever dreamed of a shortcut to pure freedom that started as a prank? Stay with me, because I'll take you inside a world where a silly pamphlet ignited a devotion people still chase today. It all began in a tiny Dallas bedroom in 1979. You could taste the fresh ink on photocopied pages and hear the click of a mimeograph machine. Two college dropouts, Ivan Stang and Philo Drummond, passed out a single sheet titled Sub-Genius Pamphlet Number 1. They teased that the world would end unless readers embraced Slack, a mysterious state of effortless ease. That night, a spark flickered, but it didn't burn out as planned. By 1980, a legend named J.R. Bob Dobbs had surfaced, his clean-shaven grin beaming from homemade flyers. Bob was a 1950s salesman who'd supposedly been beamed up by an alien god named Jehovah One. The basement gatherings filled with candlelight and strange chants, each ceremony laced with wry jokes about televangelists and secret cabals. But beneath the laughter, curiosity grew sharper than the mimeograph's hum. And that's when parody edged toward something more. Fast forward to an early summer day in Chicago. You'd smell hot asphalt and hear the distant buzz of traffic as Subgenius members set up tables on a cracked sidewalk. Flyers promised free tubes of toothpaste, a gift from Bob, and the chance to enlist in an apocalyptic army of slackers. Some passers-by laughed, others paused, intrigued by the neon masks and bizarre slogans. Yet when one young woman abandoned her job application on the spot, clutching an invitation to X-Day, the prank had woven its first real spell. X-Day came on July 5th, 1998. Imagine dawn breaking over a field scattered with sleeping bags and empty soda cans. Hooded figures slipped through misty grass, their bamboo staffs carved with rubber stamps of Bob's face. Birds flitted among makeshift altars built from old vinyl records. At high noon, they awaited a sky filled with flying saucers and salvation. But the sky remained blue and empty. Laughter rippled through the crowd, until tears surfaced and a hush fell like a curtain. They had come expecting a joke. They stayed believing something true might follow. That moment revealed the power of Slack. Originally a snarky word for goofing off, Slack morphed into a sacred aim. College students dropped classes, trading textbooks for tattered subgenius handbooks. Workshops in rented church halls smelled of coffee and cheap incense as would-be prophets lectured on the conspiracy, a vast, sinister plot to rob humanity of its Slack. Friends argued over whether Slack was a cosmic force or just a clever marketing scheme. But everyone agreed, quitting Slack felt like losing air. Inside the movement, rituals multiplied like secret recipes. Late-night radio shows called The Hour of Slack crackled through college radio waves, knitting listeners into a hidden fellowship. You could almost taste the stale cafeteria popcorn at 2 a.m. as Ivan and his crew cracked wise about pop culture and biblical parodies. Phone lines lit up with whispers of new revelations. And rumor had it that a celebrity or two had dialed in, seeking their own slice of easy freedom. But which stars? That story grew bigger every week. As the 2000s rolled in, the church splintered into house parties and online forums. A devoted follower named Slackmaster Joe built a shrine from old cereal boxes and neon streamers in his parents' garage. He lit candles that smelled faintly like burnt plastic and hosted midnight screenings of goofy propaganda films. People flew in from across the country for garage raves that pounded with drum machines and chants of "Bob's got your back." The beat dropped, and for a moment, Slack pulsed through every speaker. But the line between homage and obsession started to blur. Then came the confessionals. In quiet interviews, longtime members admitted they'd sold cars, emptied bank accounts, and even skipped funerals, all for a chance at Slack. One woman whispered that she'd abandoned her newborn with relatives to spend a weekend at a Slack convention. The scent of chlorine from hotel swimming pools mingled with regret as she recalled waiting in line for Bob's autograph at 3 a.m. "I thought it was a joke," she said, voice trembling. "But the joke swallowed me whole." Today, the Church of the Subgenius lives on in every corner of the internet. Bright avatars flash in Discord chats, sharing new prophecies and old pamphlets. College radio still crackles with the Hour of Slack. And every July, a handful of diehards gather in a dusty field, bamboo staffs ready, to wait again for X Day's promise. Some bring fresh flowers. Others bring filing cabinets stuffed with yellowed zines. They line up beneath a sky that never delivers, but hope never quite dies. So what can we learn from a prank that refuses to stay a joke? That sometimes a whisper in a basement can echo through decades, binding people together in longing and doubt. And most of all, that the search for effortless peace, Slack, can become its own kind of cage. Next time, we'll step into another fringe world where laughter and longing collide, and discover how one harmless laugh can spark a revolution. Stay tuned, because the next shock is just a heartbeat away. Extremist activism stunt, Church of Euthanasia. Ever wondered how one outrageous message can cut through the noise and force an entire nation to stare at its own reflection? Stick around, because I'll show you how a wild prank turned into a cult phenomenon, and how you can flip the script on apathy with a single stunt. Picture September 13th, 1993, on the Massachusetts Turnpike. The air smells of hot asphalt and idling exhaust. Brake lights wink in a sea of brake lights. Drivers heading home peel their eyes toward the Museum of Science billboard, only to find it draped in a 10-foot black banner reading, "Save the planet, kill yourself." The shock of that message slams into your chest like a car horn in traffic. No logos, no phone numbers, just 4 words daring you to question every assumption about life, growth, and the planet's limits. That midnight banner was the Church of Euthanasia's opening gambit, and it left the Commonwealth buzzing for days. Flashback to 1992, Boston's graying sidewalks and college courtyards peppered with hand-rolled pamphlets. There, Chris Korda and Pastor Kim passed out the boldest invitation in town. Join a religion that gave one commandment, "Thou shalt not procreate," and 4 wild pillars of action. Suicide, optional but encouraged. Abortion, may be required. Cannibalism, mandatory if you insist on flesh. Sodomy, strongly recommended. People ripped open those leaflets like presents, hearts pounding at the audacity. And so began a movement that mixed Dada performance art with ecological alarm bells, each stunt louder than the last. Fast forward to a sweltering afternoon at the 1992 Democratic National Convention in New York City. The streets pulse with campaign chants and the smell of hot dogs from nearby carts. Among the sea of delegates, followers of the Church of Euthanasia slipped on identical black t-shirts and handed out stickers stating, "Save the planet, kill yourself." Delegates blinked, then laughed, then paused. The joke felt sharper than any campaign slogan. By sundown, police cars sported their own clandestine decals, and every news bulletin carried that chilling phrase like a virus. Suddenly, environmental collapse wasn't just a lecture, it was an urgent dare. Then came the first Jerry Springer Show appearance in 1995. Imagine the harsh glare of studio lights, the electric buzz of an audience clapping on cue. A banner unfurled behind the guests. A bright red fetus framed by the words, "Kill your fetus, not your pet." The crowd squealed. Springer leaned in, eyebrows raised, as Pastor Kim explained how voluntary population reduction might save the planet. Some viewers guffawed, others trembled. Within hours, late-night callers pleaded for phone numbers, and protests sprang up in Springfield, Massachusetts, and beyond. The stunt turned late-night fodder into fiery debate about life, choice, and responsibility. On September 10, 1994, Boston's Population Awareness Day marched into Kenmore Square. The dawn carried a tang of salt from the Charles River, and protesters rallied under banners advocating gentle solutions. Then a group in black robes appeared, carrying a 6-foot wooden cross draped in a bloody baby doll and a torn American flag. The drumbeat of shocked gasps echoed off brick storefronts. Reverend Corda rolled a giant RU-486 pill prop down the street while chanting, "Save the planet, kill yourself." Organizers shouted for them to leave, but half the crowd cheered on, phones raised to catch every moment. That stunt sent mainstream activists scrambling to answer questions they never imagined. In the late 1990s, the church operated like an underground lab of absurdity. Picture a smoky loft in Brooklyn, candles flickering on hardwood floors, the air thick with stale popcorn and cheap incense. Chris Corda screened, "I like to watch," a 4-minute collage of hardcore video and World Trade Center footage set to an electronic track. Every cut felt deliberately cruel, a twisted echo of modern media's appetite for violence. Viewers covered their eyes, then peeked again, drawn by equal parts horror and fascination. That stunt blurred the line between art and atrocity, forcing conversations about desensitization and collective guilt. By the turn of the millennium, the church's website brimmed with e-sermons and the journal Snuffit, each issue more provocative than the last. Pages crackled with razor-sharp slogans, "6 billion humans can't be wrong," and "Eat a queer fetus for Jesus." Email lists buzzed like hives whenever a new manifesto dropped. Some followers quit jobs and relationships to chase the movement's fringe rituals. Others watched from afar, hearts pounding as each post challenged their deepest values. What began as prank photocopies had become a global flashpoint in the war between environmental urgency and human hope. Their final stunt came in 2003, when instructions on helium asphyxiation vanished from the site after legal threats. The silence felt heavier than any banner. In the hush that followed, many wondered if that disappearance signaled the end, yet the spectacle lingers. The empty banners, the shredded baby dolls, the flicker of a black and white website still archived online. They all remind us that shock can be a mirror, reflecting our most uncomfortable truths. So what can we learn from the Church of Euthanasia's extremist activism stunts? That sometimes a single, piercing act of absurdity breaks through noise and forces reflection. And that in the right hands, even the wildest prank can become a rallying cry for change. In our next story, we'll step into another world where bold spectacle shatters complacency and discover how one daring performance saved a forgotten community from oblivion. Stay close, because the next revelation is waiting behind the curtain. Survivalist neurosis and nuclear bunkers, Church universal and triumphant. Ever wondered how a spark of fear could drive a community to bury itself beneath Montana's mountains? Stay with me, and I'll show you how panic digs deeper than any steel vault, and how you can keep your own worries from becoming a hidden prison. It began in the summer of 1986, where pine needles carpeted a rolling ranch near Yellowstone. Followers of Elizabeth Clare Prophet, known as Guru Ma, drove yellow bulldozers across red clay, sinking giant corrugated tanks into the earth. The air smelled of hot metal and fresh soil, and each scoop of dirt felt like carving out a promise of safety. Words spread in hushed tones. Here, in these buried oil tanks, lay the centerpiece of a new world. But what no one spoke of was the price of that promise. Inside those steel arches, the air tasted faintly of diesel from the 31,000-gallon spill that had seeped into drinking water. Flickering bulbs cast long shadows on concrete walls where rows of bunks stood ready. A woman named Sarah Collins once traced her fingers along rivets stamped with dates, her own life savings paying for one cot among 125 souls. As generators rumbled, her heartbeat matched the machine's pulse. She felt safe until the weight of recycled air sank in, and she realized the real bunker was in her mind. By late 1989, murmurs of war had woven through every dinner table in Paradise Valley. Prophet's inner circle quietly bought Barrett .50 caliber rifles and Uzi machine guns under false names, stacking crates of armor-piercing shells beside a rocket launcher parked by a bunker door. The hush of ammunition crates closing was sharper than the Sunday sermons beneath painted pyramids. Locals drove by and raised eyebrows at tanks stamped with bullet holes. Yet inside the compound, those weapons whispered a grim lullaby of "We are ready." On March 15, 1990, marked in prophecy as Armageddon's dawn, more than 2,000 members locked themselves inside the underground labyrinth. Outside, news crews huddled in early spring chill, lenses focused on steel doors sealed tight. Inside, candles flickered against panic-white faces as believers held hands and counted down. Every tick of the clock felt like a hammer drop. Midnight passed. No flashes of light. No distant boom. The only sound was the hiss of water filters and the slow exhale of dashed hope. When dawn's pale light finally crept through hidden vents, the doors swung open on a world unchanged. Reporters snapped photos of stunned believers blinking at the Montana sunrise, their rosaries tangled in muddy boots. At first, disbelief spread like wildfire through the bunkers. Could this be a mistake in timing? But as failure settled, so did a new determination. Construction never stopped, and bunkers kept selling for up to $200,000. Fear, it seemed, was more contagious than any prophecy. In the months that followed, relations with neighboring towns grew as frosty as winter winds off the river. Ranch hands whispered of empty barns and diesel-stained creeks that locals avoided like a bad dream. At community potlucks, ice clinked in glasses as polite smiles hid deep unease. Some villagers swore Prophet had twisted her own visions into a panic machine. Others defended her, saying a wise leader must always prepare for the worst. The valley itself held its breath in the silence between those competing truths. Today, the bunkers stand like buried ghosts, their steel ribs rusting beneath wildflower crowns. Inside, abandoned hallways still echo with footsteps that never came. Sarah Collins traded her cot for a weathered porch swing in her hometown, where she now teaches a simple lesson. Fear can build walls, but courage tears them down. She rinses the taste of diesel from her lips each morning, reminding herself that safety lives in open skies far above any locked door. So what can we learn when neurosis digs deeper than our shovels? That preparing for disaster makes sense, until panic becomes the disaster itself. In our next story, we'll step into a hidden temple carved from ice, where devotion and doubt collide in a frozen heart. Stay close, because the next spark of discovery is just beneath the surface. UFO contact claims, I am movement. Have you ever longed to touch the stars and hear a voice from beyond Earth? Stay with me, and by the end you'll uncover how a humble shoe salesman convinced thousands he was channeling cosmic masters, and how you can separate true signals from static. Picture a misty dawn in 1934 on Mount Shasta, air tasting of pine sap and dew, every footstep muffled by soft moss. Guy Ballard, a mild-mannered shoe salesman, scrambled up the slope in worn boots, clutching a tattered backpack. Local rumor said a hidden temple lay buried beneath the summit's granite, where voices of ancient spirits whispered guidance. When Ballard rounded a boulder, he froze. A glowing figure in golden robes hovered near a cave mouth. That stranger spoke of Saint Germain, an immortal master from Venus, and Ballard thought he'd found purpose. Hold that image, because it was only the prologue to something much bigger. Months later in downtown Chicago, the Ballards transformed rented halls into candlelit sanctuaries. Imagine the scent of melting wax mingling with old carpets, rows of folding chairs facing a simple wooden podium. Edna Ballard, hair pinned high, read from pages of unveiled mysteries, her voice low but clear, as if reciting a secret never before heard on Earth. Listeners leaned forward, heartbeats echoing like distant drums, as she relayed Saint Germain's warnings of planetary upheaval and promises of cosmic ascension. That hush in the room felt alive with possibility, and membership soared into the tens of thousands. But what no one realized was how thin the line was between inspiration and illusion. In a snug living room in New York City, a young teacher named Clara tuned into a scratchy shortwave radio late one night. The dial crackled, then smoothed as a gentle voice emerged. "We speak through the ether to guide you." She jotted notes by candlelight, sensing a presence that felt tender and wise, an alien mentor speaking directly to her soul. She shared those transcripts at a local I Am Senate meeting, where members lit bundles of sage and chanted, "I am the presence," until dawn. Clara swore she felt her mind expand, floating beyond her apartment walls. But was it a genuine transmission, or simply her longing for meaning overdriving a fragile signal? By 1938, the I Am movement claimed nearly 1 million adherents. Conclaves stretched from Los Angeles to London, each one a tapestry of silk banners, gilded emblems, and whispered prayers for world peace. Followers swore that ascended masters from Mars, Venus, and beyond were monitoring their efforts. Yet in 1942, under the glare of courtroom lights, prosecutors charged Guy and Edna Ballard with fraud, arguing their visions were nothing more than elaborate fiction. The hush that fell when Ballard took the stand was thicker than any temple curtain. Spectators watched him bow his head and insist that truth need not prove itself to a jury. That case reached the Supreme Court, which ruled the state couldn't judge religious belief. But what happens when belief meets evidence? And can you really judge cosmic contact in a courtroom? Fast forward to a smoky Hollywood backlit in 1954. A film crew gathered around a faux temple set, shooting a publicity reel for the I Am movement's latest radio program. Under glaring floodlights, actors in futuristic robes channeled pie-in-the-sky messages about flying saucers and cosmic peace treaties. Off camera, though, real believers huddled in parked cars, dispatching runners to rural cabins with new leaflets promising direct contact with Space Brothers. The scent of hot asphalt mixed with uncertainty, some fans bought gas station radios to catch nightly broadcasts, while others whispered that the movement had lost its cosmic edge. But that broadcast's final plea for donations would spark a wave of clandestine contact claims that swept the country. In a cabin near Sedona, Arizona, an elderly devotee named Harold tuned his homemade crystal radio at midnight. The silence crackled until an ethereal choir drifted through static, singing in perfect harmony about the age of Aquarius. Harold pressed a hand to his chest as the choir faded into a man's voice. "We are the Galactic Council. Prepare your hearts." He wept silver tears under a raftered roof, convinced he'd touched a higher reality. Yet when he shared the recording, skeptics pointed out it matched a popular sci-fi radio drama. That clash, between longing for proof and desperate belief, would haunt the I Am movement for decades to come. By the 1970s, the I Am movement had splintered into smaller offshoots, each chasing its own cosmic promise. Some built steel vaults for ascension accelerators. Others sold crystal pendants said to tune psychic ears to interplanetary channels. The desert Southwest filled with whispered legends of members camping under meteor showers, seeking face-to-face encounters with star beings. But as UFO sightings dwindled and recordings of those crackling broadcasts aged like relics, many wondered if the real contact had always been in their hearts, not the heavens. Today, descendants of Ballard's followers still meet in sunlit sanctuaries, chanting, "I am," beneath towers of quartz and brass. They offer guided meditations that claim to bridge human minds with cosmic consciousness, and social media brims with videos of shimmering orbs captured on phone cameras. Some figures promise a new wave of extraterrestrial messengers. Others urge caution, reminding seekers that the truth is tested by compassion, not sensational claims. In those quiet gatherings, the scent of burning lotus incense mingles with curiosity and doubt. So what can we learn when a simple promise of cosmic contact becomes a movement that spans generations? That yearning for connection can light powerful fires and also cast deep shadows. In our next story, we'll dive into a 1970s commune in New Mexico where LSD and alien theology fused into a psychedelic religion, and uncover the one question every explorer must ask before following the stars. Stay tuned, because your next glimpse beyond the sky is just a click away. Mass quarantines and prophecy, Shincheonji Church of Jesus. Ever felt the rush of wanting clear answers when the world around you starts to shake? Stick with me, and you'll find out how one church's apocalyptic vision triggered a citywide lockdown, and learn the one question that could stop panic from spreading next time. Imagine a crisp winter morning in Daegu, South Korea, just weeks after the first reports of a strange new illness. The air smelled of frosted concrete and burning wood as people lined up outside makeshift testing tents. But one patient changed everything. A 61-year-old woman, later dubbed Patient 31, had quietly attended a Shincheonji gathering, passing through the crowded pews in a hall thick with candlelight and hushed prayers. When she fell ill, the virus she carried leapt from person to person, turning that silent church service into a cascade of feverish coughs and frantic calls for help. And just like that, Daegu found itself under mass quarantine. Backstage in the church's echoing corridors, leaders insisted the outbreak was part of a divine plan foretold by founder Lee Man-hee. Weeks before, he'd held a secret prophecy meeting in a cozy seminar room scented with old books and floral incense. Members sat on plush carpets, eyes fixed on Lee as he spoke of a coming trial that would test true believers. His voice was calm, each word measured like a soft drumbeat. When the world trembles, only those sealed by faith will stand. The atmosphere felt electrified, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to catch every syllable. But no one expected that trial to come so soon, or to rip through the church faster than any sermon could heal. When the first cluster appeared, local hospitals brimmed with anxious faces. Nurses cleaned stretchers with bleach, the sharp scent stinging their throats, while doctors charted rising numbers on whiteboards. Officials raced to seal off neighborhoods, blocking roads with cement blocks and bright yellow tape. Shincheonji's main center wound up under tight guard. Armed officers patrolled the gates as volunteers in neon vests guided members to waiting buses. Inside the church building, the hum of tinted lights and distant prayer chants blended with the beep of medical monitors. Every cough echoed like a warning. Families living near the church compound bore the ripple of fear. One grandmother whispered that her grandchildren had nightmares of masked strangers knocking on doors and leading townsfolk away in white suits. The night air tasted metallic with worry, and every car headlight became a ghostly glimpse of what might come next. Neighbors barricaded windows and stockpiled rice and kimchi, convinced the lockdown could last for months. Yet in the hush between rattling carts and barking dogs, many wondered, could faith alone shield them when illness slipped past every prayer? Inside makeshift isolation tents, hearts pounded as fever dreams took hold. A young singer who'd joined Shincheonji for comfort now lay on a cot under a plastic sheet, nostrils stinging from the hospital's antiseptic spray. She hummed a soft melody she remembered from worship services, hoping it would anchor her to sanity. Nearby, an elderly man stared at the fluorescent ceiling tiles, tracing prophecy verses in his mind. From this darkness, the chosen will rise. But when he tried calling home, his voice cracked on the line, swallowed by static. In that moment, prophecy felt both a lifeline and a lie. As mass testing swung into overdrive, volunteers in white hazmat suits moved like silent storms, collecting swabs and offering water in paper cups scented with antiseptic. The hum of generators blended with murmured prayers, and every result beeped through their radios like a Judgment Day bell. More than 5,000 members would test positive, hundreds more shocked neighbors and medical staff. And when the last church member finally stepped out from under quarantine, the city found itself changed in ways no sermon could reverse. Today, Daegu still carries the echoes of those weeks. Empty subway cars, shuttered shops, and the memory of faith colliding with fear. Shincheonji reorganized, holding outdoor services under clear skies and urging members to choose caution over prophecy. Families of survivors share stories of tears turned to relief when a test came back negative, of hands held across hospital gowns, and of the question that saved them. Are we caring for each other, or just clinging to a promise? So what can we learn when prophecy meets real-world panic? That no vision, no matter how grand, can replace the simple act of looking out for your neighbor. In our next story, we'll step into a remote commune where visions of utopia unraveled under the desert sun and discover the single mistake that turned hope into heartbreak. Stay close, because the next revelation is just beyond the horizon. Brazilian spiritual apocalypse cults. Ever wondered how whispers of a coming end can pull thousands into candlelit temples beneath the tropic heat? Stick around, and you'll see how faith fused with cosmic visions, and learn how to spot the first ember of obsession before it turns into a blaze. Picture a dawn so still you can hear your own breath, as members of Veil do a Manhesser gather outside their temple under Brazil's vast sky. Their gowns ripple like gull wings as they await the first ray of sun. Each year on May 1st, called the Day of the Indoctrinator, they chant personal missions to jumpstart human evolution, believing they're heirs to an alien tribe of jaguars from Venus. You feel the earth hum beneath your feet while incense curls around your ankles. But what begins as comfort soon spins into a choreography of control, as leaders in fairy tale robes start rewriting reality one ritual at a time. Fast forward to a wooded clearing near Brasilia, where another group, known as Kamunho do Eden Brazil, holds midnight rites under star-sprinkled darkness. The air tastes of damp moss and wildflowers as hooded figures pass vials of herbal drink, promising visions of Armageddon and rebirth. A young journalist slipped into their circle once, drawn by rumors of spirit doctors who heal wounds with spectral hands. By candlelight, she watched a trance seeker convulse, then collapse into tears of wonder. When her recorder went silent, she realized the ceremony had blurred the line between hope and fear, and once crossed, that line never returns. In Sao Paulo's concrete sprawl, a smaller sect called Filhos do Cosmos meets in an abandoned warehouse painted with spirals and stars. Here, members pore over pages of a weathered handbook by a self-styled prophet who claims to channel messages from dying galaxies. The room smells of stale coffee and sticky spray paint as believers decode cryptic equations, prescriptions for survival after the world's final countdown. One engineer swapped her day job to build a radio tower on a rooftop, convinced that when cosmic masters call, only her antenna will carry the rescue signal. But when her nights began filled with static and sleepless dreams, she learned a vital lesson. Obsession can sound like revelation. Back in the Valley of the Dawn, Aunt Neva's ghost still haunts the marble halls, reminding followers of a prophecy that time itself would fracture. Under vaulted ceilings carved with angelic faces, new recruits kneel before a shrine of mirrored glass, tracing their fingers along etched runes. The air shimmers with heat, and every whispered confession feels like a tether tying you closer to the founder's promise of a golden future. Yet, as recent studies show, these sacred spaces can also become pressure cookers, where the slightest crack in belief invites collapse. And when belief crumbles, so do the walls that once protected the mind. Across Brazil's north, rumors swirl of a cult by the Amazon River that blends Umbanda spiritism and doomsday warnings. They brandish machetes in jungle camps, claiming to cut away sin before the floodgates open. At dusk, the scent of burning leaves thickens the air as tribal drums pound like tribal war horns. An old fisherman told me he once joined their night encampment, lured by stories of a flood that would drown the cities and a safe island hidden downstream. By dawn, his clothes were caked with mud and spilled kava, and he fled with a single thought echoing in his mind. When hope turns hungry, it devours you. So how do these movements hold sway long after the prophecies fade? Because they give people one gift above all: certainty. In a world of shifting truths, that certainty feels like home. But when the door to home locks from inside, escape becomes the bravest act of all. In our next story, we'll step into a remote Andean monastery turned esoteric fortress and uncover the question that sets minds free. Stay close, because the next revelation is waiting in the stillness before dawn. The Family Rosary Army, Marytown, USA. Have you ever wished for a simple ritual that could glue your family together like never before? And by the end of this story, you'll know exactly how a hidden shrine in Illinois sparked a worldwide wave of hope you can bring into your own home today. Picture a chilly autumn morning in Libertyville, Illinois, where the scent of fallen leaves mingles with incense drifting from a red brick chapel. Waltzing through wrought iron gates, families follow a path lined with statues of saints, each one softly lit by dawn's first glow. They've come to Marytown, drawn by whispered promises that a single prayer could change the course of a household, and perhaps the world. Father Patrick Peyton, a gentle Irish priest with eyes that twinkled like morning dew, built this place in the 1950s. He called it Marytown, a refuge where the rosary would become an army of prayer to defeat loneliness and fear. In those early years, he'd gathered families under cafe tables in New England, passing out hand-knotted beads and teaching simple prayers. But it was here, by the soaring spire, that the movement caught fire. Microhook. What was it about Marytown's soft echoes and colored light that turned chance visitors into lifelong crusaders? Hold that question close, because the answer lies deeper than these stone walls. Fast forward to a sunlit afternoon in Central Park, New York. Brides and grandmothers, toddlers and teens form a circle on the grass, clutching all-twine rosaries that snap between their fingers like tiny tambourines. They whisper each Hail Mary in unison, the air humming as if the leaves themselves lean in to listen. A sudden breeze rustles through, and a few drops of rain begin to fall, yet not one person moves. Instead, they open umbrellas, solemnly unfurling the next bead. At that moment, something miraculous happened. Dozens of umbrellas bloomed like flowers, creating a canopy of shared faith against the gray sky. Microhook. But when those umbrellas folded as one, the real power of the Rosary Army was revealed, and it wasn't just in fighting rain. In the 1970s, the Rosary Army turned to college campuses and football stadiums, weaving prayer into pop culture. Picture a chilly night at a stadium in Boston. Spotlights flicker across turf. The roar of the crowd soars, then suddenly hushes when 1,000 voices rise in prayer. Twine-knotted rosaries ripple through the stands, each knot a promise of unity. Fans exchange beads like trading cards, and in that roar quiet, the message grows louder than any megaphone ever could. Saints and sneakers mingle in the bleachers, and in the hush between chants, students learn that faith can be as catchy as any fight song. Microhook. What song would your family play if prayer could be your anthem? We'll explore that moment soon. Back at Marytown, beneath the chapel's stained glass rose window, lies a hidden grotto carved from gray stone. Lanterns glow with a soft orange pulse, and you can almost taste the cool dampness off the marble walls. A young boy once traced his fingers along mosaic tiles, each one a tiny testament to prayers whispered here for decades. When he pressed against a carved niche, a wooden door swung open to reveal a small library of prayer journals, handwritten by visitors who'd witnessed healed hearts and answered crises. Microhook. What secret words did they write that turned this grotto into something more than a cave? That whisper will guide you when you bring the Rosary Army home. Today, the Family Rosary Army thrives in living rooms and smartphones. Picture a mother kneeling beside her toddler's crib at dusk, streaming a guided rosary podcast from Marytown's founders. The glow of the tablet blends with the soft creak of floorboards as Father leans in, gently guiding tiny fingers over each bead. Across continents, a grandmother in Manila listens through headphones, praying along with voices she's never met, yet feels as close as family. Every Hail Mary bridges kitchens, playgrounds, and balconies, reminding us that distance means nothing when hearts are linked by prayer. Microhook. So how can you start your own circle of hope with just a handful of beads? The next step might be simpler than you think. In every whispered echo of a rosary bead, the Family Rosary Army passes on a promise that even the smallest prayer, offered together, creates a shield of love and peace around any home. It asks just one question: will you gather those you love and pray? In our next story, We'll step into a remote desert retreat where silence becomes a teacher and uncover the single moment when a lone pilgrim found her voice in the hush. Stay close, because the next journey begins with the turning of a single page. Internet-born creepypasta cult scares. Have you ever felt a chill crawl up your spine when a simple online tale seems to leap off the screen into your real life? Stick around, and I'll show you how digital horror stories turned into midnight gatherings that will haunt your dreams. It all started on a quiet forum where one user posted a short fragment about a wandering spirit named the Hollow Light. The words glowed white on a black page, and readers described feeling a soft breeze brush their necks as they scrolled. One night, a commenter swore they heard tapping at the window hours after reading the story. You'd think it was just nerves, until someone shared a photo of a pale figure standing outside their glass door. But that was just the spark. Imagine a group of fans, messaging each other in hushed tones, treating creepypasta as gospel instead of entertainment. They slipped from keyboard to real life by organizing a secret chat called Lantern of Ash. Each new member had to whisper the code phrase into a voice channel at 3 a.m., their words echoing through the darkness like a half-forgotten lullaby. One recruit described candle wax dripping down their palm as they listened to a soft chant through their headphones. By dawn, everyone in the room had read the same bloodstained text file, and no one slept for 3 nights straight. What they thought was a game took a sharp turn towards something more. On a damp fall evening, rumors spread of a forest meetup near a broken signpost. Members were told to bring a single white candle and follow the narrow path lined with stones scraped into strange symbols. As the moon slipped behind clouds, figures emerged from between the tree trunks, their faces hidden by gray hoods. Someone held up a phone to record the circle, but the screen went black, then flickered to show silhouettes dancing, though no one recalled moving. Suddenly, a distant howl froze them in place, and one candle guttered out on its own. They ran back to their cars, but the camera still leaked a soft, hollow glow. That glimpse raises a question you can't ignore. Stories like these went viral, and soon even skeptics were drawn into midnight rituals and online dares. They called themselves the Circle of Static, named after the crackling noise that plays at the end of the original Hollow Light file. A few members claimed the static whispered secrets to them at odd hours, names, dates, fragments of prophecies. One young woman texted her friend that she could taste static in the air, like metal dust sanding her tongue. She deleted her posts, but the friend swears she still gets messages at 2:22 a.m. that only say, "It's time." And every new recruit finds that their devices go haywire. Screens flicker, apps crash, and the same static hums beneath the error beeps. So what happened when a journalist tried to expose them? Jake, a local reporter, spent nights lurking in the online channels, copying texts and collecting audio clips. He planned a live stream from the old mill where they held their grand ceremony. As he walked inside, he felt the floorboards groan under his feet, and the smell of candle smoke stung his nostrils. He set up his camera on a dusty table and clicked record. Then the hoods came in, their whispers rising like a tide, circling him in a ring of flickering light. Jake lifted the live stream on his phone and saw the comments go wild, viewers begging him to turn the camera. Just as he did, the circle broke, and everyone stepped back. The static started, loud enough to rattle his skull. He dropped his phone. When he picked it up, the chat was empty, and the screen showed only a cold, white frame. Jake hasn't posted since. Now, you might think this is just the next phase of internet folklore, but there's something darker at play. The stories lure you in, then blur the line between fiction and a shared ritual. People report waking up with bruises shaped like the symbols from the forum. Others discover that their alarms shut off exactly when a ritual is supposed to start. One subscriber to the Circle of Static said she found a single white candle burning in her room at sunrise, though she'd left the house at midnight. And each time someone tries to walk away, the whispers follow them, through their headphones, their locked cars, even the hum of the refrigerator. So what keeps drawing people back? It's the promise that the next scare will reveal something profound, maybe a peek into another world, or a secret that's too tempting to ignore. And that craving makes you check your phone at 3 a.m. just one more time. It turns every rustle in the dark into a message, every flicker of light into a beckoning hand. The web of screens, chats, and midnight meetings spins tighter with each click. By the end of this video, you'll understand how an innocent story file grew into a digital cult, feeding off our collective curiosity and fear. You'll see why silence at night feels heavier, and why every whisper online can prompt real-world action. And you might never view your screen the same way again. Ready to uncover the final piece of the puzzle? Stick around for the next video, where we dive into the creepiest real-life cult signs that started with nothing but a few haunted words. Dr. Malachi York's Doomsday Forecasts. Ever wanted to peek behind the curtain of a modern apocalypse prophecy? Stick around and you'll discover how Dr. Malachi York's end-of-days predictions gripped thousands, and why they still send shivers down spines today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what dates he set, how his followers prepared, and why whispers of his name echo whenever the lights flicker. It began in a sunlit community hall in Brooklyn, where York, a magnetic speaker with a honeyed voice, claimed visions as a child. He painted pictures of falling stars woven through the sky like silver threads. Listeners spoke of a sudden hush when he spoke, a moment so still you could feel the weight of his words pressing on your chest. But what sparked his first public prophecy? Coming up, the date that changed everything. In the spring of 1997, York announced a great flood would drown the eastern seaboard. One devoted listener, May, described waking in the night to a damp chill that felt like sea spray on her skin. She spent weeks filling buckets with water and stacking crates in her basement. When May came and the streets stayed dry, did York admit he was wrong? Or did he twist the vision tighter? Stay tuned to find out. Then came the Y2K scare. York pinpointed midnight on January 1st, 2000 as the moment civilization would collapse into darkness. In a dusty farmhouse in Appalachia, a small band of believers lined candles on wooden shelves. As the clock ticked closer, the scent of beeswax grew thick in the stale air. When the clock struck 12, the power held, and the candles guttered out one by one. What York said in the flickering glow still haunts that group. We'll hear that confession next. Not long after, York founded the Ark of Salvation, a secretive enclave in rural Georgia. They hammered together a crude wooden vessel in the back room of an old barn, each board stained by candle soot and sweat. Members whispered that the wood breathed under their palms, as though alive. Inside that makeshift ark, they'd wait for the great cleansing fire. What drove them to build this refuge? And what happened when its doors swung open? That's coming right up. In 2002, federal agents raided York's compound and seized dozens of handwritten journals. The air inside the rooms smelled of stale paper and fear. Investigators say they found pages blotted with blood and chalk-drawn symbols under every mattress. York vanished into custody, claiming persecution for his prophecies. But one tattered manuscript slipped through the shuffle, and it contained a date so precise that even skeptics paused. We'll reveal those chilling numbers in a moment. Despite his arrest, whispers of York's forecasts spread online in hushed chat rooms. Late at night, followers logged in with headphones and swore they heard disembodied voices murmuring the next doomsday. Fans described a soft humming, like a lullaby for the end of the world, that echoed under every system error. Was it a glitch or something more? Up next, we'll explore the signal that drew believers back, time and again. Years later, a quiet sect in California still gathers under the name York's Watchers. They meet on foggy Sundays, tracing symbols in the condensation on window panes. Each sees shapes of falling ash or lightning-split skies when they press their fingers to cool glass. They say the world teeters on the brink every time the dawn sky turns lavender. What secret signals do they believe we're all missing? We'll dive into their cryptic code next. So why do York's doomsday dates refuse to fade? It taps into a shared tremor, our hunger for certainty when the world feels like it's slipping. In a pitch-black room, every whisper in your ear becomes a prophecy, every flicker of your screen a warning siren. That creeping doubt draws us back, like moonlight pulling on the tide. Now you've seen how Dr. Malachi York wove visions, ritual, and raw belief into a tapestry of fear, and why his echoes still linger in quiet gatherings and the dark corners of the web. In our next video, we'll unmask another forgotten prophet whose end-times prediction nearly emptied a town. Until then, watch the skies and listen for the hum. White Brotherhood Esotericism, Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy. If you've ever longed to peek behind the veil of hidden wisdom, stay with me and you'll uncover the secrets that made Madame Blavatsky the most talked about mystic of her time. By the end of this journey, you'll see how her ideas still ripple through every spiritual gathering you walk into. It all began in a dusty country mansion where a young Helena von Hahn curled up beside a flickering candle in her grandfather's library. The air smelled of mothballs and old leather as she fingered thick tomes on alchemy and ancient legends. One midnight, she swore a whispered voice brushed her ear with words no child should hear. That moment lit a spark she could never extinguish, and it led her straight to her first vision. Years later, Helena set off on a whirlwind tour of Europe's winding streets and strange temples. She dined beneath Venetian lanterns and slept on carpets in Cairo's dusty bazaars, each night drifting into dreams full of jeweled halls and countless masters. Listen closely. In a humble tea house in Delhi, she felt an electric hush settle over the room the second she spoke of the Great White Brotherhood. That hush carried a promise, and a puzzle that would shape her entire life. In the chill of a London dawn, she met her first true teacher. Fog rolled over Hyde Park's gravel paths as a tall figure in flowing robes approached, scenting the air with faint jasmine. He placed a cool hand on her shoulder and spoke of an ageless wisdom hidden beneath every creed. He told her she would found a society to share these truths, and then he vanished into the mist. What he left behind was a whispered mission she never forgot. Back in New York City in 1875, Blavatsky and two friends gathered 20-something souls in a candlelit parlor on Fifth Avenue to launch the Theosophical Society. The candle flames danced against gilt mirrors as they outlined three core goals: unity among all people, study of world religions, and exploration of unseen forces. Everyone there felt the air thicken, like electricity before a storm, and knew they were part of something that would spread beyond those walls. 2 years later, she unleashed Isis unveiled upon the world. She watched ink settle on thick paper in a smoky Brooklyn print shop, the scent of fresh type pressing against her fingertips. That first printing flew off shelves, stirring debates in parlors and coffee houses. But this was just the beginning, because buried in its pages were hints of a grander work, one that would challenge every idea about life, death, and everything beyond. In 1882, Blavatsky and her partner Henry Steele Olcott sailed to Udyar, India, to build a headquarters unlike any other. Nights there brimmed with the scent of jasmine and the hum of cicadas as they laid the first bricks. Followers whispered of midnight gatherings where candles formed a glowing ring on the lawn, and strange chants rose into the humid darkness. Those chants held 3 syllables said to unlock insights any seeker could never unlearn. Behind the scenes, she wrote The Secret Doctrine by lamplight, the pages strewn with cryptic stanzas she claimed were drawn from an ancient text called the Book of Zion. The lamp's flame trembled as her pen traced words about root races, cycles of rebirth, and the law of karma. One night, she paused, hearing the soft click of a wooden door, and felt the air thrum with a promise. Hidden codes in her writing would lead future explorers to truths no skeptic could ignore. Yet controversy trailed her like a shadow. Critics in dark suits stormed into her gatherings, accusing her of trickery as their polished shoes echoed on marble floors. She simply smiled and refilled her teacup, the steam curling like a silent rebuke. Then she'd slip back into a quiet room and teach a small circle the same lessons that had millions talking. What she whispered there still lingers in the minds of her most devoted students. Even after her death in 1891, whispers of the Great White Brotherhood grew louder. Spiritualists on both sides of the Atlantic spoke of nightly messages in crackling radios, of faces seen in candle smoke, of dreams dripping with honeyed symbols. Modern seekers still trace her ideas in yoga studios and New Age festivals, breathing in incense and soft flute music as if it were the very air of Blavatsky's first temple. So why does her vision endure? Because she tapped into a universal hunger to believe that beneath every surface, another world waits to be found. Her words became a map, and each symbol a doorway we still knock on when the lights go out and the silence gets too loud. Now you've seen how one woman's midnight visions and candlelit confessions gave birth to a movement that still shapes spiritual quests today. In the next video, we'll step into the hidden rites of another secret society, where every handshake hides a clue and every word could unlock eternity. Stay tuned, because the next threshold is closer than you think. New Age death wish sects of the 1970s. Ever wondered what drives people to see death as a gateway to higher truth? Stick around and you'll uncover the secret vows that led followers to embrace their own end. It started in the flat, dusty lounge of a shared house outside Houston in 1974, where two former theology students named Marshall and Bonnie claimed they'd been chosen by extraterrestrials to shed their human shells. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood as they passed around a photocopied pamphlet, urging readers to view death not as an end, but as graduation to a higher plane. One recruit described the hush that fell when they chanted together, like the final note of a lullaby. But that was only the opening act. Fast forward to November 1978, deep in the jungles of Guyana, where Jim Jones stood before a crowd of nearly 1,000, his voice low and oily. He called them his family, and they came with coolers full of bright pink Kool-Aid. One member swore she felt an electric charge roll down her spine the moment the first dose passed her lips. They'd practiced white nights, rehearsing mass death until it felt like a ritual of rebirth. What made them taste that sweet poison without flinching? We'll explore that secret next. Halfway around the world in London, a quiet group called the Process Church of the Final Judgment held candlelit meetings in a converted chapel. Soft incense clung to the air as they slipped into robes dyed with ash. Their creed spoke of a cosmic balance: light, darkness, death, and rebirth, and they claimed personal sacrifice would hasten the end of all suffering. One curious journalist who sneaked into their inner circle later said she could almost hear her own heart slow as she repeated their whispered vow: "I give myself to the void." But what happened when the church doors slammed shut behind her? Coming up, the tale you won't forget. Meanwhile, in a rented mansion on the coast of California, a small UFO-focused faction tied their fate to a passing comet. They believed the comet's tail carried a healing mist that would strip away all fear, if they were already gone to greet it. On the night it neared Earth, they sat in a living room glowing with lanterns, eyes closed to candlelight, humming in perfect unison. The windows rattled as if the stars themselves were kneeling at their feet. When dawn broke, only empty chairs remained. The wind still carried a faint hum they said was the comet calling. What voice guided them that night? We'll hear it in a moment. In each of these groups, death became a rite of passage, a final test of faith and unity. But the vow of silence, the hush before surrender, that's what bound them together more tightly than any promise of light. They shared whispered codes, passed down through scraps of paper soaked in incense, telling members exactly how to prepare, where to gather, and what to feel. Then there was the notorious White Room ritual in the hills of Oregon. No singing, no chanting, just the slow drip of candle wax on cold stone. New recruits woke in the dark to find their own names carved into the door frame, a tally of all who had come before. One young man claimed he tasted cold metal on his tongue as he readied the ritual blade. By sunrise, the ritual blade lay unused, but the bond had been sealed. He never spoke of what he saw behind that door. Next, we'll slip inside that silent chamber. But why did these vows feel so magnetic? Why did ordinary people swap sweaty bedsheets for ritual robes, or trade their morning coffee for a glass of poison? It's the pull of certainty when the world seems too vast, too empty. In a dim room lit by flickering flames, every heartbeat echoes like an answer. Every whispered promise becomes you. By now, you've seen how a thirst for cosmic belonging turned into orchestrated farewells. You've traced the path from candlelit pledges to the hush of empty chairs. And you felt the slow draw of that final promise, one last step into the unknown. Ready to learn how survivors rebuild their lives after such vows? Up next, we'll talk to those who walked away at the last second and the inner voices that still warn them at 3 a.m. Mirror People Psychological Experiments. Ever wondered how a simple reflection can pull secrets from the deepest corners of your mind? Stay with me and you'll uncover the hidden power of mirrors to reveal who we really are. It began in a sunlit lab in downtown Chicago, where volunteers entered a small booth lit by a single bare bulb. The air tasted faintly of cleaning spray and metal, and the only sound was the soft hum of fluorescent tubes overhead. When participants peered into the two-way glass, they didn't see their own face first, they saw someone else's. One woman gasped, her breath catching like a sudden winter chill, before realizing the face repeating her every blink was her own, filmed just moments earlier. That jolt set the stage for an experiment that would reshape our view of the self. But what drove her to tears at the sight of her own reflection? We'll explore that next. In the famed mirror room test, psychologists built a chamber with mirrors angled to create endless corridors of light. Volunteers stepped inside, feeling the press of glass from every side. At first, they noted a peculiar calm, their image repeated in perfect symmetry. Then, almost without warning, the mirrors shifted to show distorted versions. Arms slightly longer, eyes too wide. A man described a sudden queasy twist in his gut, as if he were watching a close friend become a stranger. He reached out, fingertips brushing cool glass, trying to steady the image that had betrayed him. What happened when the lights went out? That's coming up. Next came the blindfold surprise, a twist designed to unmoor the senses. Participants sat blindfolded while a hidden screen displayed shifting faces. Sounds of a heartbeat thumped low through speakers, and someone whispered their name from just behind them. When the blindfold was lifted, they faced a mirror more than 2 meters tall. Some screamed, others laughed, convinced the reflection was a ghost or a twin. A young man told researchers he felt his heart hammering in his throat, certain he'd left his body behind. Why did his own face spark such wild imagination? We'll dig into that secret in a moment. Then psychologists tested the doppelganger effect. They used real-time video to blend a volunteer's reflection with footage of another person. One woman watched in wide-eyed disbelief as her own mouth curved into someone else's smile. She felt a strange thrill, like spotting a long-lost sibling in a crowded room. Her palm tingled where it pressed against the glass, as if the other person's energy seeped through the surface. How did her mind reconcile two identities in one mirror? Stick around to find out. A quieter experiment unfolded on a foggy February night at a rural research station. The late-night reflection study invited only those who claimed they weren't afraid of the dark. Inside a windowless cabin, mirrors lined every wall, and candles flickered on a single shelf. Volunteers reported hearing soft footsteps behind them, even when they were alone. One man said he smelled burning pine, though the room held no fire. As the candlelight danced across his face, he swore he saw a shadowy figure step into view, then vanish when he blinked. What triggered those ghostly whispers? More on that is just ahead. By the time researchers designed the self-fulfilling prophecy trials, they knew mirrors could do more than reflect. They could transform. In this setup, volunteers read a positive statement about themselves while staring into a mirror, then repeated a negative one. A young woman began by declaring her strength, feeling a warm glow in her chest. After naming her fears, she hesitated, her reflection trembling like a candle in a breeze. Days later, she admitted she believed the mirror had changed her. Her confidence rose and fell in perfect sync with each affirmation. How can words in front of glass rewrite the story we tell ourselves? We'll unpack that next. Across all these tests, one thing became clear. Mirrors aren't just surfaces. They're doors to our hidden thoughts and fears, and sometimes they push us to become someone new. After each experiment, volunteers would report dreams filled with endless hallways of glass, or find themselves hesitating in front of their bathroom mirror at home, suddenly unsure who was looking back. Now you've seen how simple reflections can unlock secrets, blur the lines between self and other, and even reshape our beliefs. In the next video, we'll dive into the uncanny world of mirror neurons, the real brain cells that make all this possible. Until then, take a good look at your reflection and ask yourself, are you seeing what's real or what's waiting to be revealed? Subterranean bunker survivalism groups. Ever wanted the ultimate insider's tour of how underground communities prepare to outlast every apocalypse? Stick with me and you'll discover the secret blueprints, wild rituals, and surprising bonds that make these bunkers more than just concrete and steel. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how each group carved safety beneath the surface, and what drives ordinary people to go underground. It all kicks off in a former Cold War missile base in South Dakota, where the VIVO-S network carved out 575 private bunkers beneath rolling prairie hills. Imagine walking into a massive concrete chamber, air thick with the tang of fresh filtration and the faint hum of generators warming up. Families move in with stacks of canned beans and board games, bonding over fire drill practice and shared chores. At 3 a.m., the emergency siren test rattles your skull like a warning drum, yet you'd never feel safer. But what happens when power fails and the doors lock tight for weeks? We'll dig into that next. Next, picture a steel tube dropped into the Texas soil by Atlas Survival Shelters. You step through a hatch and find a snug hallway lined with brushed metal walls, the smell of cold iron clinging to your jacket. Inside, a family of four built a garden under grow lights and set up bunks on steel racks. You can almost taste the recycled air filtered through Swiss-grade purifiers as they walk you through their emergency ration of freeze-dried stew. Yet when a blackout hits the county grid, their voices on the intercom go eerily quiet. And that's when they learn the hard lesson about over-reliance on tech. Stay tuned for how they adapted. Halfway around the globe, on a misty ridge in New Zealand, a circle of wealthy investors financed hillside vaults carved from volcanic rock. Each bunker feels like a cozy ski lodge, with timber paneling and wool blankets stacked in corners. You hear the drip of rain on concrete roofs and smell pine logs burning in a hidden fireplace. But behind the luxury lies a strict membership test. Newcomers must show they can produce enough food underground for a year. One hopeful recruit failed on day 2, after panic made her hands shake so badly she couldn't thread a seed into a planter. What happened to her plans for a second chance? We'll explore that story soon. Down in Oregon, a handful of do-it-yourselfers tunneled into sandstone cliffs to build their own self-sustaining cave. The first thing you notice is the earthy scent of damp rock and fresh tomato leaves thriving under LED panels. They installed rainwater catchment barrels and a hydroponic trough for lettuce and basil. After months of digging, they found a spring trickling beneath the tunnel, and the constant gurgle became their lullaby at night. But when a winter storm cut off their surface supplies, they faced a brutal choice: ration seeds or surrender the bunker. How they solved that crisis will surprise you, coming up next. Beneath Chicago's worn downtown, urban preppers slipped into abandoned subway tunnels and claimed a forgotten station as their secret refuge. Imagine the echo of distant trains rumbling overhead, footfalls on damp tiles, and the musk of decades-old grease in the air. They repurposed an old ticket booth as a command center, wiring it with battery banks and low-watt bulbs. But when homeless neighbors stumbled upon the hidden entrance, tempers flared over food shares and space quotas. How this underground community forged a fragile peace without drawing unwanted attention reveals an unexpected rule of bunker life. We'll get to that in a bit. In rural Kansas, a group of farming families pooled resources to dig a network of interconnected shelters under a sunflower field. You can almost taste the dry summer air above as you slide down a ladder into cool earth. Inside, each bunker has its own mural painted by a child, sunflowers and windmills in bright acrylic. They hold monthly potlucks by lantern light, sharing stories of last season's drought and celebrating each canned peach they can themselves. What binds them isn't just survival, though. It's a promise whispered at every meal: we leave nobody behind. How they enforce that vow when outsiders knock on their hidden hatch. Stay with me to find out. Finally, across the Atlantic, a decommissioned German missile silo transformed into a luxury communal fortress. You step past steel blast doors, feeling your pulse quicken as hydraulic seals hiss shut behind you. Inside, a vault of wine barrels sits under dim track lights, and a co-working space hums with laptops on polished metal tables. Yet every month, they conduct a silent meeting in candlelight, where each member reads a short confession about a past fear they overcame. That ritual shapes trust deeper than any concrete wall, yet it almost shattered when someone broke confidentiality. What saved the community from collapse? We'll reveal that secret soon. Through each of these underground havens, one truth emerges: survival isn't just about stockpiles or filters. It's about rituals that forge trust, tests that prove commitment, and the unseen code that tells you who belongs. When the world above trembles, these groups find grounded strength and shared purpose, and a single misstep can echo through every tunnel and vault. Now you've journeyed through vast community bunkers, DIY caves, and secret subways, and you know why ordinary people risk everything to live beneath the surface. In our next video, we'll uncover the initiation rites that decide who stays and who's left outside when the hatch closes. Until then, ask yourself, if the ground trembled tomorrow, where would you go? The Anthill Kids, Rock Terrio's Canadian cult. Ever wondered how the promise of salvation can twist into a nightmare? Stay with me, and you'll see exactly how Rock Terrio turned hope into horror inside his Canadian commune. It all began on a crisp spring morning in 1977, when a small group of outsiders gathered in Roche's rented farmhouse in Sainte-Marie, Quebec. The air tasted of damp hay and fresh paint as they listened to his low, confident voice promising a world reborn. One woman later said she felt goosebumps race up her arms the moment he called himself Moise. But what he whispered next would bind them tighter than any chain. You'll hear that in a moment. By midsummer, the group hiked into dense pines on a mountainside rock dubbed Holy Ground. They pitched canvas tents under dripping branches and hauled in lumber to build a rough wooden hall. The scent of sawdust mixed with pine resin as they hammered boards in place. When their makeshift chapel stood, Rock declared it the center of a new Israel, and he had already marked the date of the coming apocalypse. But when that day passed in silence, how did he keep their faith alive? Stay tuned to find out. Rock answered questions about his failed prophecy by teaching a new rule. Every woman in the commune must bear his child to prove loyalty. Under the hot sun, 9 young women exchanged nervous glances as he placed a hand on each of their heads. The summer air turned thick with sweat and dread as they signed over their freedom in rough journal entries. Yet nobody walked away, not yet. What they endured in the weeks that followed will chill you to the bone. Inside the cabins, the temperature dipped each night to near freezing. The women huddled on straw mattresses, the smell of damp blankets pressing in close. Rock roamed the corridors in bare feet, his breath loud in the dark, claiming visions had guided his hand. When someone disobeyed, even a single whispered doubt, he ordered them to stand in the yard at dawn, arms outstretched like offerings. What happened after the sun rose will shatter any sense of safety. Soon, whispers of violence trailed the group. Followers spoke of midnight thumps in the barn where Rock forced them to test their devotion against cold steel and blistering heat. One man woke to find his own belt buckling tighter around his wrists. He swears Rock had snuck in while he slept. Rumors say he heard metal scrape against wood as the leader carved fresh threats into the door. Those scars still linger in a hidden corner. I'll show you what they reveal next. Children arrived as proof of submission, but their laughter turned hollow under Roche's rule. They pulled weeds under a blazing sun, the stalks snapping like brittle bones beneath their small hands. Hunger gnawed at their bellies, mixing the dusty taste of earth with tears. At night, they whispered of their mother's cries drifting down the hall, their own dreams haunted by the echo of a name. Pepe. How one brave daughter used that name to strike a spark of hope, coming up next. As the commune's isolation deepened, one woman named Gabrielle slipped free under a crescent moon. She tumbled down the hillside, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, before racing to the nearest highway. The cool wind whipped her hair as she flagged down a passing trucker, her words catching in her throat with fear. When she reached a 24-hour radio station, her trembling call cracked the night air, sparking a chain reaction that police couldn't ignore. But what they found when they served the warrant will haunt you. Authorities approached the commune's gate at dawn, the crunch of gravel under boots cutting through the morning calm. Inside, they discovered skin-split doors, rooms soaked in years of neglect, and a single journal strewn across a splintered table. Its pages were stained with tears and blood, each line a confession of pain. They also found relics of twisted rituals, worn tunics, broken toys, and tin cups lined up like silent witnesses. What code the journal held, and why it still puzzles experts, will be our final reveal. In court, survivors spoke of endless days spent under Roche's glare, of prayers that turned into screams, and of the moment freedom tasted like cold water on a parched tongue. The jury listened in stunned silence before delivering a life sentence. Yet Roche's story didn't end there. Inside prison walls, he continued to weave sermons that reached beyond steel bars. What happened to him in his last hours, and the message he left behind, will close out this tale in the next chapter. Now you've seen the rise of a self-proclaimed prophet, the engine of abuse he built, and the desperate escape that brought his reign to an end. But there's one more secret hidden in the margins of that blood-soaked journal, a cipher so eerie it still sends shivers through investigators after all these years. Stick around, because up next we unlock the final message of the Anthill Kids. Love has won. Amy Carlson's Mother God movement. Ever wanted an inside look at the moment an ordinary person starts telling everyone she's God? Stay with me and you'll learn how Amy Carlson built a digital shrine around her own death and convinced her followers to call her Mother God. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how a Kansas choir girl became a self-proclaimed deity, why locals on Kauai chased her off with driftwood, and how her mummified body, strung in Christmas lights, still casts a long shadow online. It began in 2007 on a New Age forum where Amy typed between sips of lukewarm coffee, "I hear codes in the sunrise." The stale taste of burnt toast lingered as she clicked send. A stranger named Amerith White Eagle replied that those weren't dreams, they were divine whispers. That night, her apartment felt too small for the secrets pressing on her skull. What he told her at 3 a.m. changed everything. By Christmas, she'd quit her job at McDonald's, packed a single duffel, and moved to Colorado with White Eagle. Under a cracked porch light, they passed a smoky quartz crystal back and forth. With each silent exchange, the chill of autumn air felt like an invitation. When Amy awoke, dusted in glitter the next morning, she declared to her reflection, "I am Mother." What she claimed next would spark her first wave of believers. In 2009, Amy and Amerith filmed their first live stream in a cramped basement. The camera's red glow cut through incense haze as Amy placed a hand on her heart and sighed. "I am a 19-billion-year-old being reborn to heal you." Viewers watched her shadow flicker across stained walls, the scent of burnt popcorn curling around their ears. As comments poured in, "Yes, Mother," her pulse raced with something sweeter than fame. But months later, she'd banish White Eagle and stand alone at the altar she'd created. By 2014, Amy renamed the group Love Has Won and piled into a rusty van bound for Oregon. Pre-dawn fog clung to pine needles beneath their boots as they held silent sunrise rituals on a dew-soaked lawn. The damp earth pressed cold against their palms as Amy's voice rose, promising ascension to the fifth dimension. When one follower plucked a wildflower as an offering, Amy exiled her to the roadside until dawn, alone with only a tin can and her regrets. Their fear welded them together, and her cult stretched across state lines. Yet a misstep on a distant island would test everyone's devotion. August 2020 found them on Kauai, amid the tang of salt and plumeria blossoms. Amy proclaimed she was Pele, the volcano goddess, and draped herself and lay beneath a setting sun. Locals gathered driftwood and lit fires in chant. Eggs and rocks shattered against their rented villa's windows. The thick night air shook with Hawaiian prayers until 5 panes lay in shards on the grass. Followers fled inside, noses pressed to glass, murmuring that the island's spirits sought truth. Forced from the shore by a mayor's decree, they took off with half-packed bags, but Amy's next prophecy would eclipse every protest they'd faced. By winter 2021, Love Has Won had registered Gaia's crystal schools and settled in Crestone, Colorado. Inside their compound, lanterns glowed over faded rugs and a shrine of wilting roses. Amy's voice echoed through hallways scented with pine smoke as she taught in front of a glittering mosaic of crystals. She promised she'd ascend when the world needed her most, trading her flesh for cosmic light. Then one April morning, the scent of incense vanished, and so did her laughter. What deputies found behind locked doors would freeze rescuers in disbelief. When authorities pried open the front door, they discovered Amy's body entwined in a tattered sleeping bag, Christmas lights twinkling across her chest like fallen stars. Her skin lay marble pale, streaked with the blue of silver poisoning, and glitter clung to her eye sockets like tears. The shrine at her feet held letters soaked in candle wax and promises scrawled on scrap paper. Followers still insisted she'd ascended into the fifth dimension, yet her corpse remained earthbound, a final testament to delusion. That chilling discovery shattered any myth of Mother God, but it also sparked the strangest devotion yet. Months after her death, Love Has Won splintered into echoing factions. One group rebranded as 5D Full Disclosure, posting silent retreats and cosmic mantras in the dead of night. Another called itself Joy Reigns, convinced Amy waits for them beyond Colorado's peaks, whispering instructions through dead phone lines at 3 a.m. They taste the static as if it carries her voice. So why do they cling to a faith built on a corpse? In our next video, we'll explore the psychology that keeps believers tethered to the impossible, because sometimes the longing for something greater feels more real than the truth.